Hey everyone, today's guest is Dave Pascoe for the second time on the channel. Now, you've seen Dave all over the interwebs, but today's going to be completely different. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into Dave's blood test data, and we're going to start off with biological age and then go through markers of organ systems, so kidney, liver, immune, and identify strengths, weaknesses, and all of the data on the map. So, with that, welcome, and I guess let's start with PhenoAge.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be back again. By the way, I like to call this particular episode the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Nice.
So you see, like in 2020, I seem to be doing a whole lot better than I did in like 2021. I show the year, so this would be the average trend. That would be the actual pheno age. That's my, 58 there would be my chrono age at the beginning of that year. And so you can see I am increasing as the years go by, but now like in 2024, 2025, I'm starting my downhill slide. So hopefully I can keep that trend going.
Pretty stable though. I mean, starting in I think yeah, so 2021, it's about 10 years younger uh all the way across. Like so pheno age increases by zero point 0.9 years for every year of chronological age. So starting in 2021, uh you should be, so that's 4+ years later or 3.5 years later. So that should be 3 years older. So your average pheno age for 2025 should be 51 and a half, 52. Whereas it's still, you can see it's in the ballpark, 48.6, 50. So you've resisted that year to year pheno age increase, even if all biomarkers stay the same. So that's good news. I mean, that's basically slowing, the rate of aging over time.
So far, so good. I guess we'll see how, how things go in the future.
The other thing to point out is how many tests that this isn't one data point. So what is that in 2021? How many data points? How many times did you measure?
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, about, yeah, roughly 12. I usually do about one test per month. So there's usually about, 11, 12 data points each year.
Nice. I mean, year to year change, having more data is better. So that's great news. And then what was going on in 2024? It looks like in May through the end of the year, I mean, it's like one, two, three, four, five tests all going in the wrong
Uh,
direction.
yeah, that I would really have to go dig to figure out what was happening with that. I don't know. Um, let's think. Oh, yeah, actually, I do know what was happening with that. Okay, so because I can think back to how my actual true diagnostic data went. It was around August timeframe that C.R. Clark came out to my home and did all the recording, right? And I put myself through a ton of stress because the house had just gotten remodeled. There was construction dust everywhere. I didn't know what the film crew was going to pick up. So, I mean, I just did a deep dive inside, outside the house, fixing everything, cleaning. I was really under a lot of stress. Then, like October timeframe, I got COVID. And so that's probably where a lot of this increased. And then we came back down again after the new year, and I'm like dropping ever since, except,
Nice.
except for this last one.
So when it comes to testing, are you standardizing before a test? Like for example, if you're testing on a Monday, when's your last workout? Have you standardized that test to test?
No, I have not, and I do need to do that. I typically will test like maybe on the 5th of the month. Well, actually, you can see here, sometimes it's the 7th of the month, sometimes it's the 5th, the 3rd. So I always try to hit closest to the beginning of the month when I can. But no, I mean, now I am. Now I'm trying to standardize on like at least if it's going to be a Monday, not working out at all on Sunday. Um, yeah, trying to be more thoughtful about the water that I drink beforehand, so that I'm not dehydrated. Because a lot of the times I was just rolling out of bed and just driving straight over and taking the test because I
Yeah.
wanted to be fasted. But yeah, now I want to make sure that I've got at least some water in me that makes the blood flow better. But it also makes the tests probably more accurate.
So have you standardized how much water, or it's just some rather than none?
Yeah, no, I have not standardized on how much. It would be just one of my standard mugs full of water, which is probably about 2 cups. What do
So
you
yeah,
recommend?
so I do about 16 to 20 ounces. in that range,
Okay.
not more and not less. But I don't think the amount matters. Just as long as you get some water in there, how much you would need is debatable. Like, because for me, I can urinate it out, most of it in 2 hours. So I know that that's a decent amount. So if it was 8 ounces, maybe I wouldn't urinate any of it out in 2 hours. So maybe that would be an, insufficient amount. So it sounds like 2 cups is enough, 16 ounces in your case. So the other factor though is the fasting window. So ha- um, so what's recommended is generally overnight fast, but is there an introduction of variability in the blood test data if you fast 8 hours, 12 hours, 16 hours?
That's a
Um,
great question.
yeah,
Yeah. And and I'm not eating the same food every day either. So that's even more variability.
yeah. So are there plans to, note the fasting window or for more? Because if that is, so if, imagine if some of your data is impacted by maybe one test you fasted for shorter versus longer duration, um, then it's harder to know what may move the needle, right? When it may have just been the fasting window.
You're
Um, I,
absolutely right.
I I generally have a core diet that I stick to day before the test, even though, for the 40 to 50 day period before, there may be more variability in diet, but for definitely the day before the test, I do have a core diet that I basically stick to so that it's not previous day diet that's messing up or impacting biomarkers, but I don't know, just an idea,
No,
just
that's a brilliant idea. I never actually considered that. That's why I love what you do, because what you do is, I mean, of all the influencers that claim they're doing science, you are the one that truly is doing science. The
time.
rest of us are just sort of, hackers, which so I've been sort of hacking around at this, not maybe being as intentional as I could be. So I think I'm going to take your advice and do that moving forward.
Cool.
Try to figure out some meal that I'm going to make as my standard that I'll do before the test.
Yeah, at least the core so that, you know, yeah. All right. So can we do a deep dive into PhenoAge's components? So the biggest predictor of PhenoAge is RDW. So maybe starting there and seeing how that's changed over time.
So let's go to what are we looking for? So we're looking for, yeah, blood
RDW.
health, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, let's generate that. Okay, so
And wait, real quick, I think it's important for people to know that like there's this idea of cherry picking your best data and then saying that this is your rate of aging or this is your biological age or this is your marker of organ health and only doing it like once per year. But is that really, this is Mike on the diatribe, right? On the soliloquy. But is
yeah,
that really representative of your true data? Like how many tests would one need to get an accurate representation of year-to-year change for a biomarker, for biomarkers of organ systems, for biological age, et cetera, right? So, I mean, you've got more data than me in some cases. So, this illustrates, tracking as much as you can and then looking at year-to-year change.
you can imagine if we did this like Brian Johnson does and pick our best value out of the past 2 years of each of these different, you know, each of these different markers, and then present that all in one spreadsheet for people to say, look how great I am.
The,
That's
the
just,
sad thing, the sad thing about that is like, and the thing is, I'm still torn on Brian. Sometimes I listen to him and it's like he's saying all the right things, and then I see the other side where people are just attacking him for things, and then he calls them bad actors, but he doesn't actually address the thing that he's being challenged on, which
because he can't. That's the problem.
so then it's like, is it malicious intent or is it outright ignorance? I don't know which.
Yeah, I who knows? I mean, we can't guess what's going on in somebody else's mind, but it certainly doesn't look good.
Yeah. And then it's like, if the idea is to cherry pick one's best data, and then so many people are going to follow that approach and think that that's how we should be slowing aging and potentially
Yeah.
slowing disease risk and maximizing longevity. I mean, how many people are going to be led astray? You know what I mean? So, um,
That's why I really love that you showed your blood work the other day, and we're going to show mine now, just to show people that real blood work is messy. It's all over the place. Nothing is perfect. So if somebody presents a front that, everything they do is just perfect and right on par, they're probably not being honest.
yeah, for sure. I've got weak spots. I've got like some eczema going on my eyelid and my lip now. And I'm still trying to figure out what's going on there. And for people who don't know, I've got the glasses on for the first time. And this is a new thing that I just, initiated about a month ago. So, all right. So RDW, let's start off with RDW as it's the biggest predictor of phenoage.
Here we go, right here.
Yeah. Can we zoom in just on that one and
Sure.
and move the other ones or move that to a separate?
I was going to create the drop down so that I could just generate one at a time, but I unfortunately I didn't get that implemented in time for our
Oh, no worries, no worries.
here. So is that how is that?
Yeah.
Does it show up decent on
Yeah.
your
Oh,
end?
yeah. Perfect. Perfect. Perfect.
So luckily my trend isn't like super steep, but I am trending as an increase, which is why the heading is in red. So if I'm trending in the direction of aging, it shows in red. If I'm trending in the opposite direction of aging, it's showing in the title in green.
All
So
right, wait, I'm a little bit confused, Dave. So, because the red lines are parallel.
no, oh, I'm sorry. I mean the title. If the title is in red, that means this black trend line is trending in the direction of aging. So I'm going in the wrong way, the
All
wrong
right, but
direction.
that's a very mild trend. I mean, granted, looks pretty flat, so the black line is your trend line. Okay, yeah, it's
And you can see I'm within the reference ranges here. The two red lines are the top and bottom of the reference range. But my optimal, my optimal is like really, really tight. My optimals are down here. So this is really where I would like to be in
all
this
right.
range.
So wait, so that's a good point to illustrate. So how are you determining? So your optimal is different from mine. So how are you determining optimal for just RDW in this case?
So I would have to go back to my reference table, which is going to be like an eye chart for you guys. Um, so let's see, RDW, this is alphabetized. Um, a lot of my data I cross-referenced with yours, with other stuff that I'd received like from other books and podcasts that I listened to, and of course, even using some chat GPT to look into stuff. So RDW, here's the reference range for LabCore was 11.6 to 15.4.
Yeah.
I can zoom in on this if you can't see that.
Yeah, that's a wide range. But your optimal range, your specific,
My optimal range, I set that between like 8.1 to 12.5.
but why that specific? Do you know where you, or it's just an accumulation of,
So let's see if I actually included that here.
yeah, because I think it was a little bit different on the plot.
Um, hmm, increases with aging.
Definitely up.
Interesting. It should not be different in my plot, but let's see. So 8.1 to 12.5. And let's go back to the plot. Um,
That's what was throwing me off. I think the upper limit on your range. Can you zoom in? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So the green upper limit on the green was like 12.7. It was like 8 to 12.7. That, yeah, it just seems a little bit high.
yeah,
Not seems, but so 11, I think off the top of my head, 11.4 to 12.6, and that's based on all-cause mortality risk. And then obviously increases during aging, that's my optimal range. It can be tricky though, below 11.4, um, even though that's a rare event in terms of how many people have RDWs that low, there is a significant increase for all-cause mortality risk below 11.4, but the paper that I'm referencing, it didn't differentiate where below 11.4, like it separated everybody who was 11.4 into percentiles. So there's just no way to know where below 11.4 that increase in all-cause mortality risk was. But nonetheless, that's a rare thing. Most people don't have RDW below 11.4.
yeah. I'm a little puzzled because usually on my reference table I'll have the reasoning why I set my optimal range is where I did, but for RDW I don't have that. So I couldn't even tell you where I got those optimal values from.
Interesting. All right. So wait, so your average then is somewhere around 13.
That's about what it looks like.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
then,
this would be my trend line, which I guess is plotted on my average, I think. So yeah, so I'm
yeah,
between 12.7 and 13.7.
yeah, maybe 13.2 then, maybe somewhere in the middle. So yeah, there too, you had a bunch of data points that were higher, and then you've had lately they've all been a lot better. So any ideas what you may have done to flip that?
No, no, actually, I don't, because I don't know what supplements I've been modifying that would have impact on RDW, to be totally honest with you. It's not something I've been targeting. So its movement is a side effect of other things that I've been doing. It's not nothing intentional that I've been doing to move RDW.
Interesting. And whatever you did, because you can see that what is it, 3, 5, 8, 10, I mean 13, 14, 14 above your average, and then almost all of it below that, you know. So whatever you did, what is that, 2021 to 2023, whatever you did there, whatever you changed, I mean, it's made a big dent in bringing it down. So that's good news.
Yeah. I do have there's different tabs for every blood test, all of the things that I was targeting for the next test. But I mean, that would probably take us a good 10 minutes for me to drill down and see what it was that I was doing at those particular times. But off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you.
See, if there was a way that you could drill down on what may have been behind that RDW decrease, I mean, that's like, most people struggle, I think, with RDW and bringing it down, and that it increases during aging, and that for, the majority of, whatever that is, the past 15 tests relative to the 15 tests before that, that you've gotten it to go in the right direction. I mean, I think that's big news. It's just a matter of what may have caused it is the big question. In your case, it's
Yeah.
not that you got leaner, right? I mean, you've been your body weight and workouts have been relatively stable, which suggests that it's got to be something supplement or diet wise.
Yeah. Or exercise, maybe. Um,
More fit versus less fit, or less fit in the above average data and more fit now?
yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I probably could drill down, into that data, but it would take me some time to do the
Yeah.
investigation. Yeah.
One reason I make all the videos I make is because it forces me to try to figure it out and then try to tell that story. So I'm not saying that's what you should do, but it's just, an interesting observation that I think many people could, benefit from.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm super curious because before we started talking, and I didn't have any of this stuff graphed. So really didn't have this nice pictorial view of my own data to be able to see, am I going in the right direction or not? So this has helped me quite a bit now that I can see this. So I can be intentional about things. My RDW I thought was usually so stable that I've never had any intention of moving it intentionally. So,
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. But then after you plotted it, you could see that you had some variability where it was, and
yeah,
that's not like one test where it's above your average. I mean, that was a lot of tests and
a
then a lot
lot.
of tests below, right? So something really moved the needle there. So
Yeah. So now I'll be curious to drill down and find that out for myself.
yeah. And wait, so the most recent data would probably be, I mean, it's below that 12.7, so probably around 12.6, right? Somewhere around there.
I mean, we can actually go to the real data if you want to see
Yeah.
that. Go to
The
blood marker
most for
history.
the most recent tests.
Okay,
But
so
the most recent test that you have, I guess what, 3 tests so far in 2025?
yes, yes. So
So
we're
we've
looking
got,
at like 12.7, 12.4, 12.9.
and not bad, not bad. And then wait, what it
So
said.
I've got 4 tests. Actually, I've got two of them here from February because one I did with Life Extension and the other one I did with Ultra Labs. So
Gotcha. All right. Yeah. Not too bad. I mean, I'd want to see it 12.5, even closer to 12, but it's a lot better than the probably 13 or 14 that you had, you know, 2 years before that. All right. So let's shift to kidney function. So creatinine is also included in the PhenoAge, and then we can also drill down if you have cystatin C and blood urea nitrogen, uric acid.
yeah, I don't do if I can even say it, cystatin C that often, so I don't have very many data points for that, but the rest I do. So which one in particular did you want to see? Did you want
Yeah,
to see?
let's zoom in on creatinine.
Okay, so we're right there.
I don't know if you want to talk it through, or I should go through it.
No, go for it. You do
Yeah.
it. You do it better than I do anyway.
Ah,
So
so here, yeah, I see your trend 2017 relatively high, and then you've been reducing it over time, which is good news. So
I've had a
most
few
recent,
high points there too. Yeah.
oh wow, super high points. Yeah. Um,
Now, I know that's affected by my creatine consumption.
all right. So have you consumed less creatine over time?
No, not intentionally. No. I try to consume the same amount, but um, again, most of that is in with my morning protein smoothie. And if I'm traveling, which I've been traveling a lot, then I haven't been getting my creatine. So that could be another reason why this has decreased.
So more traveling over the past, well, 8 years, more traveling, less shakes that.
Oh, no, like since I retired. So it was just within the past maybe 3 years.
Yeah, but you can see the trend line goes all the way back. I mean, this is 2020,
Yeah.
just started from there. Yeah, all right, but that could be a part of it. But anyway, all right, so going in the right direction. So for more insight, blood urea nitrogen. So assuming your protein intake is constant, kidney function declines during aging. And one of the functions of the kidney is to basically remove substances from blood, urea being one of them, blood urea nitrogen being a marker of urea in blood. So if your protein intake is a constant, when considering kidney function declines during aging, if blood urea nitrogen has increased, then that would suggest reduced kidney function. But again, key point is if your protein intake has been a constant.
Well, here's my blood urea nitrogen, and it has been increasing.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I get you've increased protein intake over the past 8 years.
Yeah, again, I don't think that I have. I think I'm still staying pretty consistent with my protein intake.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because the creatinine decrease suggests better kidney function, but if that's just a measure of less creatine, we may be masking the real situation. And if your protein intake levels have been stable over time, um, this could be related to a decrease in kidney function, but we'd have to have more specificity in terms of, how much protein were you consuming? How much is it now?
Yeah, we can look at stuff like, EGFR, which declines with age.
So EGFR is derived from creatinine. So this is basically the same measure.
Yeah.
Like the equation uses creatinine in the measure, but uric acid can give us more insight. So if uric acid is also increasing like blood urea nitrogen, that would suggest that we're on the wrong side of kidney function.
So let's see, my uric acid. Oh, there's my cystatin. See,
Two data
cystatin.
points.
Only 2 data points. That's it. Yeah.
Do you have plans to measure that more often or not so much?
I do now. I before I didn't really realize it was a worthwhile variable to be looking at.
So besides it's as a marker, it's less sensitive to changes in muscle mass relative to creatinine as a marker of kidney function. But besides that, so GrimAge, the DNA methylation test GrimAge.
Yeah.
So GrimAge is and this isn't hyperbole, GrimAge is the best epigenetic clock for its association with all-cause mortality risk. So I have a paper open in my tabs where it looked at all-cause mortality risk, head-to-head matchup, PhenoAge, not the PhenoAge, the blood-based, the DNA methylation estimation of PhenoAge, Horvath, Hannum, Dunedin Pace. And the clock that had the largest association with all-cause mortality risk by far was GrimAge. So then it raises the question, what is GrimAge trained on? And one of the proteins that, so you've got, so it's 7 proteins and it's smoking pack years, and I think chronological age. And it's right. So they took actual levels of those 9 variables. If I'm leaving one out, whoever's watching that's going to grill me on that, forgive me, but 7 proteins, right? So they took those actual measures and then did the epigenetic prediction and then used that epigenetic prediction for all-cause mortality risk. So of those 7 proteins, cystatin C is on the list. But then note that just like PhenoAge, where RDW is the strongest predictor or strongest contributor to the PhenoAge number, um, all 7 proteins didn't contribute to the GrimAge in value, right? So some are more stronger contributors than others. For example, leptin is on that list, and leptin was basically weak, but still significant in the GrimAge prediction. Cystatin C's correlation with the overall GrimAge score was very high. It was like 0.9. So I've included that on every test now going forward. For me, I'd rather have the actual biomarkers rather than the prediction GrimAge.
Yeah. Yeah. So which ones do you do every time now? Cystatin C and leptin, both?
Not leptin. So actually leptin because it was so weak, and leptin's proportional to fat mass. So, we're already lean. I can't imagine it's going to be high. Now, granted, if I started to increase body fat, I'd see higher leptin, but leptin is a low value one for me. Beta 2 microglobulin is also on
Uh,
that list. And that I'm including that for the first time next week. I'm going to do that for every test.
I,
That's
I have
also,
one test for each of those. That's why they didn't show up in the graphs.
aha, nice.
So I need at least two data points for those to show.
Gotcha. But those are the two big ones that I'm going to measure. The other ones like GDF-15, not commercially available, but very strong predictor of GrimAge. And there are a couple other ones like TIMP1 or TIMP something. Never heard of it before. Very
Mhm.
strong predictor. And then PAI1, but that's commercially available, but its correlation was weaker.
Yeah, so cystatin C is not in one of my normal panels, so I would just have to do that as an add-on from here on out.
Yeah, I think it's important. I'm going to keep including it, trying to get it as low as possible.
So my uric acid, you mentioned that. That should show up here somewhere else, but it's not showing up as a kidney health marker.
Hmm.
So maybe it's listed as a liver health marker. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, uric acid. Here
Uh,
we go. All right, so let's zoom in on that one. That one at least looks like it's going in the right direction.
yeah,
Oops.
definitely. So this is good news. The way I interpret this is the decreased creatine, less creatinine. So we can't say anything about your kidney function yet, because it may be influenced by creatine. Your bun is probably impacted by protein intake. And the reason I say that is because your uric acid is decreasing. If kidney function was declining, I'd expect to see an age-related increase for uric acid, not a decrease, with lower moving towards lower all-cause mortality risk. So this is good news. Then the next question is, when considering your bun is increasing, so urea in blood is formed from nitrogen. So your body will remove nitrogen, say from proteins, and then form urea. So urea has two nitrogen groups. So then it raises the question, is your protein intake a bit too high? And because urea isn't just the metabolite in blood, so urea in very high levels can circulate to the intestine where it can degrade the tight junctions, allowing for more stuff to leak into the blood. Now, is that at your current level? I don't remember. I think it was like 18 or 19 milligrams per deciliter. Is that high enough to do that? Um, I don't know,
Don't know.
but that could be something to experiment with as a suggestion. Maybe cutting protein intake 10 or 20 grams and seeing if that reduces blood urea nitrogen, but then also maybe you get a boost in other biomarkers too. Because if it's too high for blood urea nitrogen and that is allowing for stuff to leak into the blood, you may see changes, whether it's HSCRP or alkaline phosphatase.
We can look at those too. So here's the total protein that you were interested in.
So total protein is more a marker of albumin plus globulins. So not
Okay.
necessarily a marker of protein intake. And so, in very old people, usually albumin is thought of as a marker of malnutrition, but anecdotally, I don't know. In my data, protein intake doesn't correlate with albumin, globulins, or total protein. It's more tightly regulated than that. But we can shift from the kidney now to the liver. So albumin would be mostly a marker of liver health and function.
Okay. I mean, anything you want to see specifically, I can pull up. So
So wait, so this is good news. So albumin declines during aging. You've got it going in the right direction. Um, Pretty close to optimal. That's like what, 4.5-ish current values.
roughly around there. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, and you've got that, yeah, 4.5 to 8, I think. So yeah, right now, so yeah, you've moved this in the right direction. I mean, that's good. That's great news. So albumin is probably the most underrated biomarker, or at least my perspective. So I've mentioned this in other places, but when you think about the concentration of albumin, you see it on the y-axis, it's in grams per deciliter, right? So your value of 4.5 grams is 4,500 milligrams per deciliter. So most people are hot on glucose or lipoproteins. Even the best glucose, 80 milligrams per deciliter. So now you've got albumin, 4,500 milligrams per deciliter versus glucose, 80 milligrams per deciliter. Albumin, just based on concentration, is 6.5 times higher based on concentration in blood. So, okay, total cholesterol, 200 milligrams per deciliter versus, sorry, I said 4,500 versus 80. That's 65 times higher, right? If my math is if I'm mathing correctly.
Don't look at me. I don't do math in my head anymore.
Yeah, I may be off by a factor of 10. Let me just, yeah, it's 60-fold higher. Same thing for total cholesterol, 200 milligrams per deciliter versus 4,500 milligrams per deciliter. So albumin is more concentrated than both of those. Now, where it gets tricky in that interpretation is that albumin is a big protein, right? So you have to factor in its molecular weight, and when you do that, um, it's basically a big tree floating in the forest, and obviously there's more glucose and lipoproteins in blood, but it's a giant tree floating around that most people don't think anything about. So keeping it relatively high and avoiding that age-related decline, top tier in my eyes.
We've got some bad ones. My bilirubin's supposed to be stable with aging, but it looks like it's on the decline.
Yeah, so that can go in two ways, right? So to interpret it in two ways. One is that lower levels are found in youth and they increase during aging. And centenarians actually have relatively higher levels of bilirubin, like, we're talking double where your levels are. And um, so then the question is, do you want to have them higher or lower, knowing that centenarians have higher levels? But bilirubin can act as an antioxidant. So I think in centenarians, it's more of a compensatory mechanism where, um, their antioxidant defense enzymes may not be good. So they've got to increase bilirubin levels by degrading red blood cells and degrading hemoglobin. So I'd say lower is better, and keeping it low indefinitely is better, and avoiding the age-related increase. So this is good news that it's moved in the right direction.
Yeah, I was going to say the fact that I'm, decreasing, at least I'm heading into my optimal and within the reference ranges because I was way outside of the reference range previously.
Yeah, that suggests you had some oxidative stress going on. That would be my interpretation. Some oxidative stress going on with the very high bilirubins. What was triggering it though? I mean, that's the billion-dollar question.
Yeah.
And then what have you done to reduce it, right? Also, billion-dollar question.
Again, I don't think that was one I was targeting specifically.
Hmm.
Oh, the things that you're seeing here are side effects from other things that I was targeting.
Is there a way to go back and see, like, because you can see that there's a cut point, right? Like where it
Like
was,
right there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Whatever you did there, it shifted the balance.
Yeah. And I wish I could tell you exactly when that was. I guess I can go back to the raw data and take a look.
Yeah.
So we're looking for, oh gosh. Well, it looks like it's around 2021. So bilirubin. Uh, it's probably right in front of my face. Oh, there you go. Bilirubin. Um, I'm sorry. I have to zoom out just so I can see more of the ranges here. So let me get into 2021. So 2020, yeah, 2.9, 0.4. Yeah, so it was probably right around between, no, it's 20, yeah, 2020. So it looks like I was in the twos and the 1.7 in 2020. And then around November of 2020, I dropped down to 0.9. And then it looks like I consistently stayed lower.
Were there supplements or HBOT or red light, some therapy or something that you did that started in 2021?
Again, I've got the data. It would be tabs that I would have to go drill down into and really
Yeah.
go investigate.
Not now. If you want to do that, right? That would
Right,
be part
right. That would take us forever. I don't think people have the patience for that.
part three and part four if you want, if you feel like digging into your own data,
Yeah. So again, I mean, this is really the first time I'm seeing these graphs right now with you. I was working on the generation of them all up until this point. So this is all new to me as it is, as my data is to you that we're looking at it. So,
Nice. All right, so let's go back to liver. Let's like AST, ALT, and GGT if you have it.
okay. So here's AST, ALP, which one would you like to look at
Oh,
first?
AST, ALT.
Yeah.
We'll check out ALP too. Ah, so you have GGT the way. Do you have ALT? If you scroll up a little bit, is that one of the plots?
It
No.
is on here. It's just probably off the screen. So let me minimize here again. ALT, yeah, ALT is right
Ah, there
there.
we go. Yeah, right there. All right. So yeah, moving, moving in the right direction. Values in the high teens, low 20s associated with lowest all-cause mortality risk. I mean, here too, data moving in the right direction. So, um, the biggest question is, what did you do? You know?
Yeah, and I wish I had like done that research that I could tell you on this pod. So,
Yeah.
but I yeah, couldn't tell you right now.
All right, good news nonetheless. All right, so AST, I'm guessing we'll see a similar trend for AST. There we go, AST. All right, same direction, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, so still a bit high though. Most recent tests are in the 30s, right? High
Yep.
30s, 35. Yeah, we got
I'm
to get that
like
lower.
way out of the reference range here for most of these. So I'm now in the reference range and I'm getting back into my very narrow optimal range.
Yeah,
Yeah, most recent tests are still relatively high though.
yeah. So there is at least one paper where GGT was compared against AST and ALT for liver disease related mortality. And GGT was like the highest GGT levels, the highest 10% GGT was associated with an eightfold higher risk of death from liver disease mortality, whereas the highest AST and ALT was like a fourfold higher risk. So that suggests that GGT, when it's high, is a better marker of liver disease mortality risk. So in your case, less than 12 is associated with lowest risk, all-cause mortality risk. Very large study, 16 million people. So your GGT data is fantastic. I mean, even where you started, 12.75, that trend. I mean, you have a few data points above that, but
Yeah.
lower is better for GGT. So, it suggests that um, your liver health is good, but something's triggering your AST to be high. It could be supplements. I don't know what, is the liver, is detox, phase
Right.
two detoxification. So it could be that something is triggering that and causing some liver damage. But the good news is that GGT is low, which could be a better marker.
Hmm. More recently, I've been experimenting a little with TUDCA. So that might be helping some of these values. Or as I continue, it might help with some of these values.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it. I think it's involved with like cholestasis. So people who have cholesterol buildup in the liver and then liver dysfunction. But I don't know, maybe it's a different bile acid that I'm thinking of that you can take as a supplement. I'm going to have to look into TUDCA, TUDCA,
Mhm.
toro uso deoxycholic acid.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh
I
man,
had no idea what
scientific.
it's good
That's what I
for.
do. All right.
You must be a doctor or something.
All right. So ALP is moving in the wrong direction. I don't know that it increases during aging because the studies that I've come across, it's variable where it's generally flat. But there aren't very large epidemiological studies like for a lot of the other biomarkers to make an accurate assessment if it increases during aging or not. But all-cause mortality risk above 48, it is associated with higher risk. So, I mean, you're just outside that. It's not too far away from optimal. Um, and but moving in the wrong direction. Um,
Yeah.
but you had very low levels. I mean, that's just amazing. I don't think I've seen ALP levels as low as 30, 32.
Hmm. So again, I would be curious to see what happened again in this time frame where things were low and then they went high, then they went low, and now they're
Yeah.
back high.
And
So
then that split, that I don't know if this split is as dramatic because I can't see the dates as well on the bottom.
yeah, they're too bunched up.
Yeah, but is that split where, granted, in this case, it's a few data points that were lower and then a lot more that are variable. Is that 2020 versus 2021 again?
Yeah, we got zeros showing here and ones up at the top. So this would be right at the end of 2020 and all through 2021.
But
And
then
then
but then they increase. You get them decreasing for a lot of tests, and then they're increasing again.
it's back in 2023, 2024, they went high again, and now
Yeah.
we're coming back down again for 2025. So, yeah, I'm at a loss to account for why that is.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of what I do is trying to figure out what moves what to try to, that's the biggest challenge without tracking, um, I mean, that's something we could look into, right? Which is like, do you have variability in your supplements? Like you'll take a list of supplements, you
Not
know,
typically. No, the biggest variability that's in my life is whether I'm running or training for a marathon or not.
hmm. But the supplements in terms of the amounts stable from test to test.
Generally, yeah.
Interesting. So you think some of this is related to marathon training volume?
Oh, I have no clue. I'm just grasping at straws at this point because
Ah.
that's just one major factor that I know that changes a lot.
To address that, you've been tracking, I mean, how long you've been wearing Whoop?
Oh yeah, for gosh, probably I'm thinking not quite 10 years, maybe.
Wow.
I don't know if it's been that long.
So
Maybe
if
8 years.
you so a long time, which could correlate, we could correlate the average daily heart rate, which is in the export, and we could see, basically, so you have when you did each of these tests. So we could take the average daily heart rate in between, so say day one, day 50. Now we have 50 days average daily heart rate in between tests. That lines up with the latter test. So each test would have an average daily heart rate, and then we could see is is average daily heart rate, which biomarkers is average daily heart rate associated with going in the wrong direction for biomarkers and right direction? In other words, higher training volumes may positively impact some biomarkers, but not others. And then we get to the bigger question, and I'm not trying to modify your training volume, but it could suggest an optimal training volume to try to get more biomarkers moving in the right direction versus wrong.
So a big light bulb just came on for my in my brain. Um, because as I'm looking at my own data, trying to figure out like what was my life doing at that time. So prior to 2020, um, yeah, this might make some sense. I was still taking care of my parents. So I was still forced to, eat a lot of their food. I was not eating my own food, like the grass-fed meat, just cleaner, which, shouldn't really account for these things going up. But I also became more intentional with my supplementation. So I'm thinking that possibly it's when I did begin my full court press on supplementation.
So 2020 versus 2021 for
Yeah,
that. But
yeah.
then that wouldn't explain the increase from, 2022 up. Like you see it's pretty low for like 10 tests, and then there's a trend for it to go for the most recent, say 15 tests, like it would go up. Um,
Yeah, so there was a lot of experimentation with my supplements throughout that time.
so
So
that's
it's
yeah.
most likely a supplement that was causing the changes.
Yeah, so that too, like if we took the average supplement intake, or even, if you have a core list of supplements that doesn't change test to test, and you know only which supplements that you've added in or taken out for a period, and then, having that lined up for every test. I know it's a lot of work. It's probably something you don't want to do, but that might get closer to what might be impacting what. Um,
Additionally, I was also working on my hormones at that point. So I was
hmm.
trying to get my thyroid dialed in. So there was a lot of thyroid medication changes throughout that time. So I mean, there's confounding variables upon confounding variables here.
I don't think I've ever heard the thyroid story because I just recently was able to finally get started on switching my meds too for that. So what was your thyroid?
So I've been on supplementation probably for the past 30 some years. Um, Yeah, and the endocrinologist that I saw had put me on a very, very high dose of T4. And when I finally started looking at some of my thyroid markers, I knew they were out of whack. So I went to see an endocrinologist to argue with her for my change in medication. And one of the first things well, one of the first things she started arguing with me about when she found out I was a biohacker was that, my medication was way out of whack and I shouldn't be taking that high a medication. Of course, I had to explain to her, I did not pick that. Her father picked that. So she, yeah, changed her tune quickly after that. But yes, so we did a lot of changes over a period of months of decreasing my dosage of T4. And then at one point, we ended up even including some T3 because I wasn't converting properly.
So what was the dose of T4 that you were initially on?
I'm thinking it was like 250
Holy
micrograms.
cow.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was high.
Do you know what your free T4 was? Do you remember that, just ballpark what that was?
We could probably go take a look at that. I'm sure that's in here. In fact, we can actually look at that. We can chart that if you want to see it.
Aha, interesting.
So let's go to thyroid health. Okay.
Aha.
So which one do you want to see first?
Oh, wait. So yeah, that's free T4. So yeah, early on, I can see values as high as 2 on the left. Or you're
Yeah.
looking at T3, but on the left, free T4 is on my left, right? In
Free
red.
free T3. Is this the one?
No, above that, I'm looking at free
Oh,
T4.
sorry. All right, let me
Yeah, yeah.
zoom in.
So you had values higher than 2.
Look, I had one way up here at 6.
Oh, it's crazy. That's crazy. That's crazy that they would do that. Yeah. All right. And then
Yeah.
still getting lower. Um, I'm aiming now for values around zero point 0.8, even lower, maybe lower than the 0.75.
Hmm.
Free T4 increases, thyroxine increases during aging. That's without a doubt. So lower is generally better, and all-cause mortality risk lower is better. All right. So free T3, your average, but this is with, obviously, this is with prescription. Um,
Correct. And you see I'm all over the place on that one.
yeah. So my data, actually, your lowest data, 2.5, I'm consistently, like, so you see below the red line, you
Yeah.
have, yeah, all of my data for like 8 or 9 tests in a row since I started, digging deeper into this and not taking my endocrinologist for, just take T4. I just assumed, oh, they know better. And then I was like, no, what? I'm going to look into it.
Here we
All of
go.
my data has been 2.5, 2.3, and that's too low. I mean, like you have, it declines during aging and lower levels are associated with an increased all-cause mortality risk. So you've had it very high too, though. I mean, my gosh.
Yeah.
So what's your current dose of, what is it? I guess Cytomel or
When you think about that, I think I'm on 137 micrograms.
of Cytomel? So T3?
I believe so. Yeah.
Man,
Oh, no, no, I'm sorry. That's T4.
yeah.
T3, I think I'm on 25 micrograms.
Oh, not bad. Interesting. How many tests did it take to get you onto that? So you basically cut T4 in half.
Yeah. It took many, many months because she didn't want to, like, I think there was a good 6 months between each test because she didn't want to test any more frequent than that. Um, yeah. So I know we changed a couple of times through there, but I really couldn't tell you what the increments were.
Do you know what her rationale was for not testing every 6 months or more than 6 months?
No, I don't think there actually was a rationale other than she didn't think the markers moved that quickly.
That's ridiculous. I mean, T4, T3, when you take a pill of T3, it rises rapidly in blood. Um,
So there's another confounding variable with my data because there were times that I would take my blood test before taking my morning medication, other times that I took it after.
uh,
So that's going to change some of these values, right?
so when you test now, it's totally fasted, just water, nothing else.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to do. I've also like just I've been intentional about the last couple of tests. Um, I think the last two tests I took, I did like, well, maybe the last three tests. I tried 2 hours after taking the medication, then 4 hours, and now I'm going for 6 hours. So I want to see what the difference is in that.
Interesting. Why not just test first thing in the morning and not do any meds before the test?
I have done that, and everything shows really low, of course, because there is no, there isn't any endogenous stuff floating in my system at that point.
But
But
only, I
then I
see.
don't really know what the medication is doing when it's in. So, I mean, I know what things are going to be like when I'm off the medication, but what is the medication? Am I on the proper dose of medication is what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah. Even if you took your medic, so when you take your T4 and T3, do you take it in one dose or are you taking it in split doses?
No, just one dose.
So T3 has so T4 has a relatively long half-life. So once per day can work for that, but T3 has a shorter
Very,
half-life.
very short. Yeah.
So I've been taking mine twice per day. I mean, my doctor said take it 3 times per day. I'm not taking it 3 times per day. I looked at, I can send you the circadian rhythm for T3, the normal circadian rhythm for T3, and it peaks like 2 to 4 a.m. and then it also peaks at 9 in the morning. So I've been taking my T3 with T4, some of it in the morning, soon like 9 a.m. And then before I go to bed, I'm taking uh what is it, 10 micrograms of cytomel so that I can get some of that peak in the middle of the night to try to, after a couple hours, it'll be absorbed so that I should get that peak in the middle of the night. And then I'm taking it at 9 in the morning. So I should get that peak. So my body looks like it should get on that normal circadian rhythm for what a healthy thyroid looks like.
And just to be clear, the Cytomel is the T3?
T3, yeah.
T3. Okay.
Yeah. So I've got it
Yeah.
split in 2 doses.
We did discuss that last time with my new doctor, not my endocrinologist, my current, regular standard doctor. Um, we may look into that for this next period.
Yeah. So when considering that, if you're taking it before you go to bed, you may not need to, titrate the dose in the morning before a blood test. I mean, before bed, you should still have some amount that's still in the blood.
Yeah.
Um,
Then it would be valuable, I think, to take it completely fasted without my morning dose and then do the blood test to see.
yeah. FT3, free T3 to free T4 ratio. Have you plotted that?
Yes. Let me get this out of the way. That's over here.
And what's crazy about that too is like, I'm sure for the longest time with your blood test, they just did a TSH and free T4 and didn't even measure FT3.
Oh, yeah. If I was relying strictly on my doctor or endocrinologist test, yes, they were not measuring anything. It was just usually TSH is like all they look at.
Yeah.
So the only reason I have these other data points are because I did them myself.
So
So
how did you look into or you were just curious about how can I optimize thyroid function and then you were like, oh, I should be measuring FT3. Wow, yeah.
yeah, because I was working on everything else and I had everything else I thought pretty well locked in, except my thyroid markers were way out of whack. Once I started working on the thyroid markers, everything else just went to crap. So then I had to start all over again with trying to dial down everything else.
So when did you get so all right, wait, so FT3, FT4, I was going to say, when did you get that ratio um, to relative where it is now, relatively high? And then it looks like it's more recently that you've gotten it, or this is a trend. The trend over time has been you've been moving it in the right direction.
Yeah. The last couple of tests, I've still got some things that see now. This is interesting. So my reference ranges here are lower than I have my optimal ranges.
Huh. I mean, there may be some units. So you got to when you have FT3, it depends that you got to get the units because usually it's like 0.35, 0.37 is youthful. So there may be a unit difference because the scale, you've got it in like, digits 3.7 and maybe a unit being off where it should be like 0.367 and 0.267. But it's
Oh,
the same, it should be the same idea nonetheless. Um, but moving in the right direction. Wait, so have you felt a difference in
no,
moving?
no,
Huh,
no,
interesting.
not at all. That's the
Workout?
other maddening thing. I never knew I had a thyroid issue to begin with.
Oh man.
I never felt anything. You're supposed to have like, oh gosh, you're supposed to be tired all the time. You're supposed to gain weight. You're supposed to have, lack of interest in sex. No, I had none of that. The only symptoms I had were like my nose would occasionally be cold, maybe fingers, maybe toes. That's it. I just assumed everybody had that.
And then since your thyroid, FT3, FT4 has been increasing, cold nose, cold fingers and toes less or same?
Less, but of course, most of the time when I'm indoors in the summertime, people have the air conditioning cranked up so high, it's hard to tell. I mean, most people I know are wearing gloves anyway, so
That's interesting that you don't feel a difference. I mean, so my battle for hypothyroidism is that whole thing, like get good sleep, still tired. Um, you know, how I could sleep, I could always sleep. I'm, fingers and toes always cold, nose always cold. So, uh,
I even did an experiment on myself a few years back. This maybe be 5 or 6 years ago. I decided to just go cold turkey and just stop taking all my thyroid medication because I wanted to see what would happen. And again, I didn't feel anything. I
hmm.
didn't feel any difference. But after maybe it was a month, I started noticing like bags forming under my eyes, like really bad bags. And I started noticing my hairline was thinning. And so it was the vanity aspect of it all that put me right back on it again.
Wow. So I did that experiment too. I stopped all thyroid meds. TSH went way up. And I felt even more tired than usual.
How's your DHT?
Yeah, DHT has always been relatively high. I haven't paid attention to it in a long time, but when I measured it like 25 years ago, which is when this started to go, it was relatively high. And I didn't do anything. I just let it. Are you taking specific things for DHT to inhibit the conversion?
I do. Stinging nettle is one thing that's supposed to help with DHT. Tongat Ali is supposed to help with that.
Wouldn't the inhibition of DHT need to be localized? I mean, granted, if I'm inhibiting, if my DHT levels systemically are low, that would assume that less would make it to my scalp, but you'd want DHT inhibition in the scalp,
Yeah, topically, I guess that's something that people do. Yeah,
but you don't do that.
I don't do that. If my hair was shorter, I probably could get away with that, but the fact that it's long, it's really difficult to get things to the roots.
Yeah.
Even trying to wear like a red light helmet, it's my hair is too thick right now. I'd probably have to shave it down, and then a red light helmet would actually be effective.
Yeah. I just shave it. I don't know. Even if I did have hair, I'd probably just shave it anyway. That's just,
I'm not opposed to actually shaving my hair. It's just that my dad was always opposed to long hair hippie freaks. And so while he was alive, I could never keep my hair at any length without him having a derogatory comment to make about it. So after he
interesting.
passed and we hit the pandemic when everything shut down, February of 2020 was, the last haircut that I've had. So just let it all go just for the fun of it.
Cool. Do you grow the beard out too, just as a side note, or just keep it trimmed?
I started to, and then a friend commented, it was sort of a drunken comment across the table. I think he was trying to be helpful, but I'm not really sure. He said that if I wanted to appear younger, I should probably shave the beard closer. And I
Hmm.
realized that, even though it was sort of like a kind of a, I think it was a backhanded compliment, there was a lot of truth in that. And so now I tend to wear it a lot shorter.
But is it I haven't seen obviously I haven't seen your beard longer in that case to assess that, but it's the white hairs in the beard, but you dye it. So
I dye my hair. Yeah,
but
absolutely.
but if you were dyeing it and it was longer, I don't know, would the hair just look older and that would make you look older?
Probably.
Hmm.
Probably. But I would no, I would even dye. I was dyeing it even though it was longer. I would just had to dye more hair surface. So it was still dark, but it was just bushy. And
Hmm.
somehow that made me look older. I don't know. If you keep it close shaved, it it's got that youthful look like, you're just going through puberty and you're just finally getting hair.
Right, right, right. Well, when I let mine grow out, there's white hairs there. So for sure, shaving it, I get some more youthful look relative to the.
So the funny thing is I shave my chest hair because I have a quite hairy chest. But if I have dark hair, dark beard, dark arms, dark eyebrows, it looks really funny to have a gray chest. So I've been shaving that probably since my 30s. But now I don't even know what I can attribute it to. My chest hair and my beard hair, when I don't dye them, are like 50-50.
Ah.
They've taken on some dark color again.
So it was totally white and then went back
Totally.
to
Yeah, 100%.
NMN or something in that.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm taking so many different things. It's hard to tell. And I know that drive people crazy because they're like, well, how do you know what's doing it? To be honest, I don't care. As long as I'm trending in the right direction, I'm happy, right? I don't care what that one thing is.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope people are finding this interesting because I'd hate to think that we're boring them to death, but
I
I know I'm always glued to these when you show these and you do your markers with your friend. I'm always like, I'm taking copious notes and but I'm weird. So
Yeah, so even if it's a handful of people, the way I see it is like this is the way. Like I think everybody should be tracking multiple things over time. Like now, granted, what's moving the needle? Okay, fine. That's more devils in the details, but um, uh, just like you, I'm not bored either, and I'm sure that there's going to be people who aren't bored. And even if it's a handful, this is how we move the crowd, right? We've got to move the field into testing. Even I like Michael Greger because he tries to use the published evidence,
yeah.
the support positions, but he's recently dove into the NAD field and NMN and I'm just using him as an example. I don't want to pick on him, but there's so much of this hey, if you do this because it's been shown in a published study, you can get the same effect. But yet he's not measuring it himself. Other people who are making similar claims aren't measuring it. Like I'm just so tired of that mindset of this happened in this study, so if I do it, it'll work. No, I think the future is, and just like you're showing with your data, it's testing. We can test ourselves. These things exist for us to test all the time. And what is the optimal, driver's manual for me, for you? And it's probably different, right? And what is that recipe, right? So even if it's just a handful of people, I see tremendous value here in that you've got so much data.
I mean, when we think about it, we're of course we're different genders among the population. We're different ages, so we need different things at different times. Because our bodies stop producing the things that we might need, and so we might need a little boost from outside. We have different microbiomes that break these things down. We have different genetics and epigenetics that cause us to absorb or not absorb them the same way. I mean, there's just so many variables. So when somebody comes out with a, one size fits all supplement, I just kind of scoff at that because, one size doesn't fit all.
Have there been interventions that you've seen work in a published study that you've tried that didn't work or didn't move the needle the way you expected?
Yes, but I would be completely unable to give you a great example right now off the top of my head. Because I have tried, I'm a skeptic at everything, to be honest with you. I try things with the intention of proving that it does not work. And then if it does work, I'm pleasantly surprised. But when it doesn't work, I'm not surprised at all. So,
I've got a bunch like liver enzymes. My liver enzymes are trending in close to the 40s, high 30s, low 40s. No alcohol. How's that possible? And it was like 10 years ago. So I cut down on green tea. Green tea, too much green tea can damage the liver. That wasn't it. But yet it worked in a published study. High fructose, too much fruit. I cut the fructose down. That didn't do it. Uh, so it may have been too much omega-6 at the time. It could have been body weight because now my data is closer, to optimal, high teens, low 20s. Um, but the stuff that's been published didn't do anything, right? Imagine if I just took on hope based on what worked in others may work in me, right? I mean, the only way to know is to test. So
now that you mention it, I can't think of like green tea. I thought was supposed to be really, really good for me. So I would mix a very heavy dose of green tea, black tea, oolong tea, oh gosh, Emperor's Pu'er. I mean, all the teas that were supposed to be really good for you. I was brewing them in my like Mr. Coffee or whatever, Mr. Tea maker, and drinking them pretty strong, thinking that that would be good. But no, I think it's like the tannins or whatever that are in the teas were causing an absorption issue for like my iron was super low. My B vitamins were deficient. As soon as I stopped taking or drinking that tea every morning, everything just kind of popped right back up where it should. So, you know, side effects, you always get side effects. Something that's, can be healthy for you, done in too much of excess becomes unhealthy.
so no tea, you no tea now. You're not drinking any tea.
Now, I would love to add it back in, but it seems like every time I do it, it causes something else to go wrong.
Coffee.
Nope, don't drink coffee. I don't usually do caffeine at all.
Interesting. All
I
right.
like to save caffeine for when I really need it. So like if I'm on a long drive somewhere and I need to stay awake, then when I do caffeine, wow, it works.
So in that case, coffee or Mountain Dew, or what do you go for?
Mountain Dew, no. Um, uh, I'm embarrassed to say, but the 5 hour energy shots do the
Mm,
trick for me.
yeah. So on long driving trips, that's what I've done in the past is Mountain Dew. So yeah, 5 hour energy's in the same ballpark. You know what I mean? Just as bad. Maybe,
I don't know if it has the same amount of sugar as Mountain Dew because it definitely doesn't rot my stomach out like Mountain Dew does. But
All right, so
yeah,
we jump in. We'll start off, I guess. You want to start off with immune?
neutrophil absolute.
Yeah. All right. So just as a background, so white blood cells are in phenoage, but white blood cells aren't a homogeneous group, right? So they've got neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, basophils, eosinophils. So I don't pay much attention to the basophils and eosinophils because they're very, very small, numbers. The
Yeah.
almost 95% or more are the neutrophils, lymphocytes, and monocytes. So I focus on that. But then there too, there's some disparity because the neutrophils and monocytes increase during aging and lymphocytes decrease during aging. So if we're only focused on, and I know you're not, but there might be people out there who look at phenoage or white blood cells and they think, oh, my white blood cells are in range. They could be within range for 50 years and lymphocytes increasing, not sorry, neutrophils increasing, lymphocytes decreasing, and white blood cells stay stable, but the data is going in the wrong direction. That's a pro-inflammatory phenotype. So I find the most value in looking at the, neutrophils, lymphocytes, and monocytes. All right, so your data is pretty flat. So the trend line gets you just above, what is that, like you've got 2000, the Lustgarten optimal range, 2000 to 3000 for neutrophils, looks like in green.
Yes, yes, I do.
Cool. So yeah, aiming for the lower end of the range. Um, should be optimal. That's based on all-cause mortality risk. The question of how low, knowing that they increase during aging, somewhat debatable. I mean, 1600, 17, 1800, is that, really less optimal compared to 2100? So there is an increase in all-cause mortality risk less than 2000, but I'm guessing there probably is reverse causation there where people who have very low neutrophil levels may also have inflammation. So for those tests where you've got less than 2000, I'd look to see, was at least HSCRP low, right? So zero point 0.3 milligrams per liter or somewhere in that ballpark. If it was like 1, 1.2 with no low neutrophils, it would suggest to me that there may be a problem in making neutrophils. And then whatever's there would be, increasing inflammation. Um,
Well, remind me to go back to HSCRP after we do with this. We'll take a
oh,
look
for
at that.
sure.
Okay.
It's on today's list, Dave. It's on today's list.
Okay. Okay. Oh, good. You've got a list. All right. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I have it all mapped out. All right, so
Perfect.
neutrophils look good, especially because that trend line is right at the bottom of the reference range, or not the optimal range. And then yeah, lymphocytes decline during aging, and that's what we see here too, right? So yeah, that your data, the trend line. I mean, granted, it's just a few data points, but if you look at say 2021 when you had more tests, starting with more tests, I mean,
Yeah.
even there you're starting from about 1300 and then declining to around now 1100. So that's a big one. We want to get those closer to 2000 if we can. That's what's most likely found in youth based on population-based averages, and it's associated with lowest risk of death for all causes. So the
Wow.
question
So I'm way below 2000 then.
for now, yeah, but that you have variability in that data. So for example, just even last year you had close to 1600, 1500. So it's just a matter of what's the recipe where you avoid like 900, which you saw last year. You saw 2 years ago 900. How can you avoid the lows and have more of these highs? Even if you just go from like 1300 to 1600, flatten out that curve, that would be the first start in trying to figure out what to do to, resist the age-related decline.
Take a look at monocytes. I'm
It's
like,
definitely malleable, I should say, too, the lymphocytes. So mine recently have declined too, but I think that's dietary change. So I'm doing a bunch of stuff, and mine have been as low as 1257. I've never had them lower over the past 10 years. So we'll see if I can reverse it to get it back to where, it should be.
yeah, I'm gonna be curious to see what levers I can push to make those move.
Yeah. All right. So monocytes. Yeah. So monocytes increase during aging so that you've um, resisted that is good news. And the values are pretty good too. around, it's like
Look,
point.
I mean, look at how weird. I've got two like straight lines that I kind of ping pong between.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I don't know what that's about. That's kind of interesting.
It could be that so sometimes the lab report will say like monocytes 8%, and then it'll say point 0.3, 300, cells per microliter. Whereas if you took the total white blood cells and then multiplied it by that 8%, you get the actual number versus the rounded number. So it could be that you just wrote down, so it might be, zero point 0.3. You wrote down point 0.3s instead of multiplying white blood cells by the percentage of monocytes.
Hmm. I mean, I usually just I have it scripted where this just pulls it right off of the PDF for the lab
Yes.
report. So
Yeah, so it's like either because it looks like it's either zero point 0.2 or point 0.3. So they round it down instead of giving the actual number. But you can see anyway, it's in the ballpark, right? But it's not going to change your data from, you know, zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.3 range to zero point 0.4 to zero point 0.6 range. You know what I mean? It's a
right.
rounding issue in your case. So yeah, increases during aging, so you should be good here too. And then platelets too. Platelets are contribute to immune defense. So let's see that
Platelets. I think these are alphabetized. So platelets. No, no, they're not alphabetized. Huh. All right. So maybe I rolled past platelets. That'll be the next thing I work on is alphabetizing these so that I can find them easier.
yeah.
Uh, and just be an easy sort of the data before I chart them.
Oh wait, lymphocyte percentage. But before we go
Oh,
to
sure,
finding,
sure.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So that too, yeah, that definitely declines during aging. Higher being potentially better, and I say potentially because as far as I know, there are no studies all-cause mortality risk. All we have is the aging data. So this kind of ties in with your lymphocyte levels declining, right? So basically, total white blood cells are stable, lymphocytes are declining, so the percentage is declining. So
At
um,
least within this, I'm kind of within my optimal range mainly.
yeah, but so even there too, like if you think about centenarians, if you know, so if the glucose reference range is 80 to 94, and you've got a centenarian who's 93, you could say, or I don't know if that's the best example, maybe using like I don't know, TNF-alpha or something. If inflammation, if the inflammatory marker is less than 3 and they're at 2.8, right? So how much of aging is if they were able to keep their TNF-alpha like zero point 0.3 and avoid it getting to 2.8? Is that just the aged phenotype where now, you're in range, but it's been increasing over time, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a hard one. We've got to resist age-related change and have it in the optimal range.
Agreed. Is that neutrophils in case you wanted to see that one?
Yeah, that one, the neutrophil percentage, I'm not so, it's the lymphocyte percentage I'm most interested, but platelets.
Okay. Platelets. There we
There we
go.
go. All right, flat is good. Nice.
Yeah.
Um, they decline during aging, 200 to 300, close to optimal based on all-cause mortality risk. Lower than that, increased risk. Higher than that, increased risk. So then it raises the question, where should you be? 200 to 300? Should it be closer to 200? Should it be closer to 300? When considering it declines during aging, it would suggest higher may be better in that context. But in my data, when I do biomarker versus biomarker analyses, platelets versus the other big ones, closer to 200 may be better. In your case, those stable, so we're all good there. If they start to decline, that's another flag, or whack-a-mole. We've got to try to
Right.
cover.
I know that I clot quickly, so I rarely need bandages, especially if I do the finger prick blood test. It just clots right away. So
I'm like
that's a nice thing about having high platelet counts. But
nice. I'm like a Tarantino movie where after the finger prick, I could like squirt that, squirt.
because when it comes to was it like GlycanAge, you've got to give so much blood on the chart that I have to poke myself 5 or 6 times just to get that much blood out. So
Are you
because it
are you
clots so
doing
quickly.
are you doing GlycanAge at every test, or that's just a occasional?
It's not at every test. It is occasional. I maybe do that every 6 months.
And then when you do GlycanAge, are you also measuring HbA1c on the same day?
Not on the same day. No.
So I'd be curious about because they're glycating different proteins. GlycanAge, if my understanding is accurate, it's the immunoglobulins that are glycated, right? Or I don't know. Do you know, right? Because isn't it immunoglobulins that are glycated for
Well,
GlycanAge?
they're looking at glycosylation rather
Yeah.
than glycation.
So that's just it's so it's not one glucose group. It's just a chains of glucose groups, glycosylation, right?
Yeah, and they look at different peaks, which are proprietary, so they won't tell you exactly what those peaks refer to.
But the proteins that are glycosylated, I think it's IgG. It's not albumin or hemoglobin.
I believe you're correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so then it makes me wonder, do we need to do GlycanAge? Is HbA1c, which is like, I don't know, it's a pretty cheap test, $30 test. Uh, if there's a correlation for higher HbA1c with a higher GlycanAge, would we need both? Or is one,
It's interesting that, well, we'll look at my HbA1c. I think it's been pretty decent except for one high peak at one point. But my glycan lifestyle, they have like maybe 4 or 5 different categories. My lifestyle indicator, which they agree is not correctly named, they should name it something else because it's not really lifestyle. Mine has been in the high 90s, which is like unusually high, and it's stuck that way for years. And they can't account for it because it seems like, as a biohacker, I'm doing everything right. All my other inflammation markers are low. But in working through, this is where I employ ChatGPT from time to time. Um, that particular marker looks at, if I can remember properly, I think it's called bifurcated GlycanAge, which is not the normal GlycanAge that we're used to. It's like uh, it's an N-acetyl D-glucosamine. And I do supplement with glucosamine and N-acetyl glucosamine, but not, I guess that's the N-acetyl glucosamine is an upstream precursor of N-acetyl D-glucosamine, which is what they're looking at. So it's very possible that the supplementation that I'm taking is converting to this marker that they look at, and it may not be an indicator of inflammation at all in my case. So their science group is looking into that right now.
so a higher score would be worse?
Yes. Yeah. Zero
Hmm.
is what you want, and I'm like high 90s. So
Yeah, that's kind of like a creatinine thing too, right? So, uh,
exactly.
but I just wonder if glycation would be similar to glycosylation in terms of the correlation, or maybe they're not, So,
I don't know. I just know that Dr. Gordon Lauk, whenever he does his talks, he's very adamant about saying this is not glycation, it's glycosylation,
hmm.
and that the two are very different. But I mean, I'm taking his word for it because wouldn't know either one. So
And then the glycosylated, if it is immunoglobulins, that should decrease their function. Is that, I mean, if
I don't know because some of their markers you want them high, and some of
oh,
their markers you want low. So it's very confusing as to when you see a score. If you're at 50%, I guess you're golden, right? You're like right in the average. But if you're looking to be optimized, some of them you want to be really low score, some you want to be really high score. So
yeah. I looked into GlycanAge, but most of the data that's published is from their lab, from the Lauk lab, and I'm open to it, but it's like such early days that even though it is associated with all-cause mortality risk, I think in terms of like biological age or the correlation with chronological age, it was similar to like telomere length, which is zero point 0.5 or zero point 0.6. It wasn't that strong relative to other tests, so I kind of crossed it off for now, but. I mean, it's an interesting idea looking at protein glycosylation and associations with health-related phenotypes, right? And potentially longevity. So,
yeah, I think my previous test, I was about 8 years younger. This last test, I'm 5 years older. So,
hmm,
and it varies a lot.
yeah,
Yeah. But I do enjoy that they are willing to work with me in learning, in teaching me, but also helping them to learn, because like you said, it is a relatively new science. So we're both getting something out of the collaboration. So it's been
nice. I'm
fun.
going to look into them some more too. So it's good.
It's
All right.
kind of
Hey,
like looking at IOLO data. I mean, that's
for
that's
you, maybe. For me, it's like I'm looking at the Matrix. It's like Cypher. There's a scene where Neo walks in on Cypher looking at the Matrix, and Neo's like, basically, you can read that, and Cypher says, all I see is blonde, brunette. He sees, right, the patterns in the data. So for me, the Iola stuff is just like that.
I'm working on that. I'm graphing or getting ready to graph mine. I've been charting it for a long time, so hopefully I can. Maybe you can help me make sense out of it someday.
I was thinking that too. Yeah, for sure. So in hot off the presses data, I haven't made the video yet, but it's on my to-do list. So there's a group of metabolites in Iolo's list, lysophosphatidylcholines, and it's not all of them. It's like LPC 18, 18.1, 18.2, and I think 23. So those are the different fatty acids that are in those metabolites. Markers of muscle mitochondrial function. So there are a bunch
Mhm.
of studies that looked at in vivo skeletal muscle mitochondrial function using basically MRI through the through the skin. It's a pretty well established technique. So Luigi Ferrucci's group did metabolomics and then associated these LPCs with higher mitochondrial function. So if you have higher levels, relatively higher levels, it would be indicative of, quote unquote, good mitochondrial function. There is a caveat there. There are studies that if it's too high, maybe bad. So,
Mm,
it gets to that idea of what's optimal. You know what I mean? It's such cutting edge
yeah,
stuff that,
yeah.
if your data is at a certain level, do you want to push it even higher? Maybe that's not good. But within your own data, keeping that, avoiding the age-related decline, um, they're also decreased, those LPCs are also decreased in cancer cachexia. So, which ties into decreased mitochondrial function. So,
Wow,
yeah,
fascinating.
hot off the presses. That's the
Yeah.
sneak peek.
All right, so
All
there's
right.
HSCRP, which is nice and low,
All right, wait, can we
except for
switch to
this
the,
this one point.
besides the year-to-year change, can we go to the trend line?
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
At least,
didn't there we go.
nice, 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 nice. All right, so now, yeah, can you scroll up just a little bit?
Sure.
There we
Oh,
go. Yeah.
good.
So, yeah, so
Look at
looks
this
like,
one point right here. I don't know what that was all about, but
oh my gosh. I mean, very old people can have levels that high, right? So, uh, that's the tricky thing.
that was still in the reference range too, because you don't see the top of the reference range red line. So, but scary.
Yeah. All right. So good news is you've, been reducing it over time, whereas the most recent tests look like they're right outside of, is that point 0.2 or point 0.3 is the upper limit?
That's a great question. I mean, I can go right to the data and take a look. HSCRP. Um, Again, I need to have this alphabetized better. This is like an eye chart for me, so I can imagine what it looks like for you. Oh, here we
Yeah.
go. Okay. So 0.33. Oh no, that's 2021 data. Let me scroll over. Oh, well, silly me, my latest was like right here in front of my face. So 0.36 was my latest, like point 0.2, 0.24.
Fantastic. That's great. That's really great. Yeah.
TNF alpha looks like it's gone up a bit.
Wait, Dave, that's a big one to measure. So,
Okay.
um, I measured it for my last test. And so, so cancer incidence increases during aging, right? It isn't just avoid cardiovascular disease, cancer number two, well, in most cases, in most studies for, how we're going to die or most likely to die. So tumors secrete um, pro-inflammatory cytokines, including TNF-alpha, IL-6, HSCRP. So even if HSCRP is low, TNF-alpha, IL-6, and others could be higher. And if that trend over time, so your HSCRP is good, it's going in the right direction, but TNF alpha, if that's increasing, granted it's only two data points, IL-6,
And
if
this
that,
last one was from 2022, so this is quite old.
yeah.
So I definitely need to do a retest.
So what I'm doing is if it's below the limit of detection, I'm not measuring it for every test 8 times a year. But if it's above that, I'd start tracking it to keep an eye on it to try to keep it as low as possible.
Yeah, what is the optimal range for this? Because I don't have it not graphing on this because my numbers are so small, I think.
Yeah, as low as possible. I think the reference range is zero point 0.4 picograms per mil. Um,
Point
below the
0.4.
limit of detection. That would be the optimal
Okay. So then I'm higher than I want to be for that.
based on these, but it's just two tests. We don't know if that's representative of all data and exercise standardization. That could probably increase TNF-alpha.
Again, oxidized LDL. That wasn't good. But again, no, that wasn't too long ago. That was still 2024 though. I haven't tested that in a while.
Yeah,
I
so
think the two tests that I, or the three, yeah, two tests that I have for this were both done at my cardiologist's office. So
so the question there would be, is it so high LDL will shift the reaction to the right, more high oxidized LDL, but then if your LDL levels aren't high and oxidative stress is high, that'll also shift the reaction to the right for high oxidized LDL. So some of Iolo's ratios can be used to assess oxidative stress. So methionine sulfoxide divided by methionine, cysteine divided by cysteine, nitrotyrosine divided by tyrosine. These ratios are indicative of elevated oxidative stress, higher levels. So that could be something to look into. Is it an oxidative stress story? Is this a reduced LDL story?
and then you raised a good point. Is it related to my exercise regimen? Because I do know I don't know necessarily which day of the week I particularly do my blood testing, but um, when I do my blood testing, I'm generally sore and I can't do a workout. So I will try to get a heavy workout in the day before often, which I'm sure is probably skewing the data for some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if your data is 10-year younger phenoage on average, and that's with doing a hard workout the day before, I wonder maybe it's 15 years younger if you're
Hmm.
not. And then what's your best data too? Just like longevity World Cup. If your best data is 16.6, maybe your best data,
That was my best. Yeah.
but
I've
that
had other points close, but that was my best one.
but that's with a hard workout the day before on most days.
That one may have been, may not be. I wouldn't be sure on
Mm,
that.
yeah.
But I'm going to need to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Again, I
That could
mean, I
be.
was doing it for practical reasons, right? I want to be able to get a good workout in. And so if I get the puncture in the arm, I can't because I'm going to end up with a hematoma then if I'm starting to, like move weights the next day.
Oh, I blood test in the morning, and every blood test day I do my usual 90-minute workout, like no problem.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've given myself a hematoma before by doing that.
That's interesting because there are days when
I might be squeezing like too hard, you know.
ah so not necessarily a hematoma, but the bruising, so that's obviously not good to, too, but that's generally a function of how good the phlebotomist is. If they, I shouldn't say she, but if they're jamming the needle, too hard, oh God, that's like murder.
I may have told you this before, but I mean my veins are so flat. I do a lot of sauna, so it kind of melts away the subcutaneous fat. And it makes my arms look great. They're very, very vascular. My friends are always asking me, how do you get that veiny look in your arms? I said, well, really, I can't take credit. It's the sauna, I think, that's doing that. But it makes that vein compressed. It just flattens the vein. And I
Mhm.
always warn the people when they go to give me the needle that, look, you got to go in at a very steep angle, otherwise you're going to go straight through. And most of the young people listen to me. It's the older ladies, like the retired ladies that work at the Red Cross Center. They're always like, son, I've been drawing blood for 30 years. I think I know what I'm doing, and then every single time they screw it up. They go straight through the vein, out the other side, and hematoma right away.
Ah, gosh,
Yeah. So that's
not good.
really what made me stop donating blood at the Red Cross and started donating at plasma centers because they listen to me at plasma centers. They have an incentive to actually get the blood, where the Red Cross ladies, they don't care if they draw the blood or not. So
So when they went through your vein, what happened afterwards was like just profusely, or they're profusely apologizing. What happened there?
no, I mean they blame me. They blame my veins are bad.
Ah,
So I actually have, like, if I go into the Red Cross today, they'll probably pull up my records and they'll see all the failed attempts, which were their faults, not mine. And they say, "Oh no, yeah, we're not even going to try to draw from you. You're undrawable." And I just laugh at them because then I can just go over to the plasma center and donate just fine, and they'll pay me. So
so usually vascularity is not, I mean, granted, I haven't done sauna, so I don't know what effect it would have, but if you're, I mean, you're super lean. So if you have, obviously for people who have more body fat, it'd be harder to find the vein. But because you're so lean and the skin covering, the area is so thin, it should be easy to be vascular.
It's easy to spot the vein, but because the vein is so compressed,
Mm,
it's not like nice and fat like it should be because of all the subcutaneous fat that it can ride in. So it's like compressed between the muscle and the skin. And so they have to hit it at a real steep angle.
yeah. And then in terms of sauna, like, wouldn't that vasodilate you? It should open up your blood vessels, not constrict them.
Um, yeah, in the course of the sauna, but afterwards, I
All
think
right.
after cooling down, it sort of melts away that fat. So,
Yeah.
by the way, I liked your idea of building this into an application that I could sell. I think I may pursue that at some
Yeah.
point.
It, you're huge. When you were saying how many people are going to watch this, is it a handful? I wasn't thinking about that until I was like, oh my gosh, you're blowing up on Sierra's channel. Like, it's insane. I think it's at like 220,000 people have watched it, and she has 25,000 subscribers. So it's not her user base, it's all over the internet, right? So um,
Well,
there's a huge amount of people. I don't know if you've been paying attention to how popular your video.
no, no, I haven't.
So, and it started off very small and it's been growing over time. I pay attention every day. So
Wow. So this must be why people keep telling me I need a YouTube channel.
I've been saying it,
Everybody's been telling me. I do intend to do one. It's just, I want to find what my particular niche is going to be. So
even
it's
I've
coming.
seen there are people like Eric Buhagen, who's like this bodybuilder, like I don't want to say freak bodybuilder, but if he was here and I called him a freak bodybuilder, he'd probably think that's a compliment. Like he has a merch brand called Psycho T or something like that. Psycho. Anyway, he's not literally psycho, but he's like a barbarian throwing weights around. So he'll just put the camera on and there's no bells and whistles. He'll put the camera on. I may have mentioned this, in one of our earlier calls, right? Where camera on in his garage, which is just it's not clean. He couldn't care less. People are there to watch him and lift and do whatever he's doing and scream like a maniac with 800-pound deadlifts. 330,000 subscribers. People watch. And that's part of the reason I'm not in some like fancy studio, at least not yet. Like I think content,
Content matters. Yeah.
yeah. So even if you're just in your garage, people want to know about your lifestyle. They want to know about you. It doesn't have to be the fancy, bells and whistles that Brian's doing or any of these longevity, basically channels. Everything is just fancy bells and whistles and, so commercial and
Yeah.
corporate like so.
Yeah. And I don't want to just be like remouthing a chat GPT script to people. I want to just be authentic about what I'm doing. And, you know, yeah, I'll probably just be a talking head like this. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. You don't have to do it, it's whatever makes you happy. So, red
I
blood
just,
cell.
I have no desire to be an influencer. I mean,
Yeah,
if that
that's
makes
totally
any sense at all, it's just, I just want to live my life. But,
that
um,
that could be part of the attraction people have too, because it's like he's not sharing it, so they want to know so that, even more viewing, even more tuned in.
about this iron, I wanted to show you this whole new peak right here. This was the latest blood test.
Mm.
Look how high that is compared to everything else.
Yeah, so iron is a tricky one because when you think about like tiers, like hierarchy of health, and you put body composition, so lean mass, body fat, visceral fat, bone, right? All of that changes during aging. Physical function, obviously cognitive function, you could throw mobility, flexibility, all of the functional related stuff at the top of the pyramid, right? Because if you can't move, you're basically aged. But then what's under the hood? So now if you look at just like in a blood sample, right? So 45% of what's in blood are cells. So most of that being red blood, almost all of it being red blood cells, and then white blood cells. All right, so now what's the other 55%? So you've got proteins, metabolites, lipids. Um, so right, so those are still the big ones. Now, if you distill down even further, now you've got ions, iron, calcium, potassium. But in terms of how out of whack they've consistently got to be for the ions, everything upstream, so metabolites, proteins, cells, because they're in such higher concentrations, I pay the least amount of attention to the ions, calcium, potassium, sodium, even iron. And then instead looking at things in iron's case, like ferritin. I'd be more interested in ferritin levels. Um,
Yeah, we can take a look at that. Mine are typically low, but
yep.
I was just going to say I know what I did to cause this point. It's I've been meaning to do Julie Gibson Clark's protocol with cooking greens forever, and I did it between these last two tests.
Wow.
And so I've been doing like a little side of like mustard and turnip greens with my meal, throwing them in the blender with a banana, grinding them, drinking them. Wonderful. Instead of doing the crappy greens powders that I've gotten lazy and switched over to, like the past several years. So I thought it was great to go back to real greens, but I think I'm getting a whole heck of a lot of iron from these greens that I wasn't getting before.
So
So,
then the question is, I know hemoglobin, red blood cells, because that iron should be in red blood cells, right? So it raises the question, if your blood levels of iron are high, will hemoglobin correspondingly be high, or, is it just not as high as it should be?
well, let's find out. We'll scroll down and take a look. My total iron binding capacity. Don't know if that's interesting or not.
Yeah. Hemoglobin, red blood
Uh,
cells.
Iron saturation is declining with aging, except for this new point that's way up here.
Yeah. What did ferritin look like on that day?
Okay, let's get there. There's my white blood cells, which I think we looked at already, or did we? RBC,
We did for white blood cells.
increasing. Okay,
Wait, so red blood cells, hang on, since we're there.
okay.
So yeah, so red blood cells decline during aging. So this is great news too. You've resisted that. They can be too high, um, because if even though they decline during aging, they can be too high because red blood cells carry hemoglobin, and even though hemoglobin also declines during aging, like red blood cells, when it gets above 16 grams per deciliter, it's associated with an increased all-cause mortality risk. So for the most recent data, I'd be paying attention, even though you've basically reversed the age-related trend, you've got it moving in the right direction, not declining. Yeah, let's see the next data, hemoglobin.
I'm I'm way out of my optimal range though, so
Yeah, but let's see what hemoglobin. Let's see that's like the more important.
that's going in the right direction also.
Yeah, but you've got
Look how
I mean,
low it's been though.
so yeah, that you've got it going in the right direction in terms of resisting age-related change is great news. But there's something about those last four tests that if it's above 16, that's too high. So, but then
Hmm,
again, that could be, and then most people say, oh, dehydration impacted my results. That's why this is high, right? But for that to really be true, we'd have to look at everything for those four tests. And, is glucose high on that test? Is bond high? Is uric acid high? Everything that could be in blood, we'd expect to be higher if the volume of blood is less because of dehydration.
makes sense. Yeah.
So if this is a greens story, then it gets to the question of what's the optimal amount of greens that get you just,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, I was definitely overdoing it. I mean, like I said, greens for smoothies that I was drinking all day, greens for dinner. I could cut back on the greens for sure.
yeah.
But I know she was saying she likes to get a pound of vegetables in a day. I was probably trying to get a pound of greens in a day, which overkill.
So along those lines, that I don't know if it's causation yet, but I too have been doing a pound of greens or worked up to a pound of greens, collard greens, which I like and make a daily cook mix. And my HDL has been as low as 28 since like over the past 10 years. And I've been slowly increasing that to the last test, which was 67. Which superficially most people think, oh, higher HDL is good. You're great. What's your HDL to TG ratio? Oh, that's pretty low too. You're great. No. So HDL 50 to 60, lowest risk, all cause mortality. And there's actually published data, for once my data agrees with the published data, where there's published inverse associations for HDL with lymphocytes. So my lymphocytes for that 1257 test, also, the HDL was 67. And when I plot my data, HDL versus lymphocytes, it is indeed inverse. So in
Hmm,
my case, what's the optimal HDL where I get my lymphocytes closest to 2000? And it's not 67. So the food that's most strongly, one of the foods that's most strongly correlated with that HDL increase are collard greens. So to test that, I cut back. Granted, it's not 16 ounces, it's 12 ounces, just, 25% cut. But if that's causative, I should expect to see HDL come down from 67 to some lower number. So greens are an all-star. It's just a matter of how much.
Right. So we could look forward to that in a future episode.
100%.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so hemoglobin, all right, MCV, how about that should be down here too?
Okay, we got hematocrit going in the right direction. Let's see what do we got here. Oh, what was this? That's
Oh,
MCV right there.
MCV,
Yeah.
yeah. So that does increase during aging.
And that's the one where we've got the roller coaster effect going on there with the
Interesting.
plotting.
But even though the trend line is up with the roller coaster, I mean, 90 is far from terrible. I mean, values, MCV values increase. Well, granted, you've had a couple that are in that ballpark, but still like 95, 100 centenarians can have very high levels MCV, very big red blood cells. So
Hmm.
that the higher end of your range is around 90, good news. Now, does that mean your red blood cell health would be better if it was around 84, 85, the lower end of your range versus 90? I don't know, but um, generally smaller red blood cells are found in youth, more likely to be found in youth. A lower MCV, more likely in youth. So the glucose, HbA1c, if you have however many data points you have, um, and then lipoproteins.
Those are probably going to be under metabolic health, I would
Yeah,
imagine. Okay, there's glucose.
yeah. So pretty flat though. I mean, it looks like your average is somewhere around 90. Most recent average is somewhere around 90, but it does.
Yeah,
I'm
higher
kind
than
of
I
in the
would
same
like.
boat. Say that again.
Higher than I would like. Yes.
Wait, so let's go to, do you have HbA1c in this tab? That will
Uh,
provide more insight.
didn't we just look at that or no?
Nope.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh, HbA1c. So that's going high.
Yeah, so I place the most value on HbA1c. So, um, I mean, glucose can be impacted by lots of things. How long is your fasting window? And then, the HbA1c, it's like a 3 month average for, glycation of hemoglobin, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, this one to me more value than glucose being in optimal range, but then HbA1c, that trend.
I find this fascinating because I've been avoiding sugar like the plague. So it's not sugar intake that's causing this.
Yeah. Finding out what does it is the billion-dollar question.
Yeah, yeah. I also have a prescription for acarbose, which I have not been taking.
Hmm.
I was planning to, just experiment with that as needed. Like if I knew I was going to go someplace where there was going to be birthday cake or something that day, I could, hit the acarbose and, blunt that sugar spike. But now, I mean, after looking at this, I'm considering maybe just going on it
So
daily.
that's one part of the equation. What about insulin? So even
Okay.
though acarbose will limit some of the glucose from being absorbed, um, it
Cool
won't
stuff.
block all of it.
IGF. What else? There we go.
Insulin,
Here's
yeah.
insulin. It's
So,
all place.
well, I mean, the trend, I mean, yeah, there is a lot of variability there, but it's flat. So, but insulin is a tricky one because, so pancreatic beta cells secrete less insulin at older ages, and it's actually lowest in youth, peaks about 10 years later, and then comes down. So inverse U for insulin. So if you had relatively low insulin, it'd be hard to know is it youthful or is it, just pancreatic beta cell failure. I doubt in your case it's pancreatic beta cell failure, especially since you can have values as high as 5. But yeah, we've got to figure out what we can do to bring down that HbA1c.
I love how you have all this memorized.
It,
I was
it,
fascinated watching your video about this, and I thought, well, yeah, maybe he kind of brushed up on it just before the video. But no, I mean, I can tell right now you've got this stuff down.
yeah, it's not even
Yeah.
memorized. It's just like I don't even try to memorize it. You know what I mean? It's like
Just
I don't
second
know.
nature to you. Like you
Yeah.
said, looking at the matrix and being able to read what it says.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah.
And there too, I'm still learning, it's like I'm deep into this stuff every day. I'm still learning. And then there are things that I'm like, do I really understand that as well as I do? It gives me a double take. So
Well, I mean, that's a great question to ask about any of the stuff that we do today, because we think we have an understanding of it today, and then tomorrow they come up with some new research and new data that turns it all on its head, and we can look at it completely different.
yeah. And I'm happy to change my mind and be wrong, but I I ultimately always try to minimize that probability. I want whatever I'm putting out there, whatever I'm saying or making videos, I want that to stand the test of time for decades. so that I could be like, look, I was saying that for 30, 40 years. Yeah, I already, so
Right.
whereas, there's so many people that are like, oh, I used to believe this, now I believe that. It's that, well, did you have the full, and I don't want to name names, but there are a few where they've changed their stance on various things. But anyway,
And see, that's why I would tend to believe you because you're looking at your own blood markers. You know what moves what in what direction. You know why. So yeah, I don't think other people are necessarily doing that. You are.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that makes you credible.
Thanks, Dave. I wouldn't say I know why. I have a guess based on the correlations because, causation would be very hard to prove. I'd have to like, if it was collard greens and HDL, I'd have to completely remove it and then, for a few tests, see what happened to HDL. But I don't want to do that. Like, so all I can
Right.
do, is get the recipe that gets me my best data and then see what the correlations show.
Yeah, greens are great. I don't want to take them completely out of my diet. Again, that would suck. So implemented this last night too, by the way. So
Nice.
LD, we want to just see LDL, right?
Yeah. Or ApoB, would that be there in
Oh,
the same thing?
ApoB? Sure. Yeah, let's just go up and do that first. Um, there we go. ApoB, generate.
Yeah, so let's see here. So what is that? 87. So it's your trend line is around, average is around 87.
Yeah, way out of my optimal because there's my optimal down here.
Yeah, so the optimal is a tricky one. So when I look, and I mentioned this in my most recent video, or maybe it's not out yet. I don't know. I can't remember. But it's coming out this Sunday if it's not out there yet. But so ApoB, the reference range is I think it's less than 115. And then Quest has the reference that they use to determine that as their reference range. And it's a study from 2004 by a scientist named Waldius. So, I'm always doing deep dives in the literature, trying to figure out what's the most recent data because, the reference range is just behind the times. Like it takes them forever to update their ranges based on the newest and, best literature. So,
Looks like life extension has it here as 109.
That's too high too. So that
Yeah.
study in 2004 was the Amoris study by Waldius. And it just so happens that I ended up finding that same study, which was a longitudinal study published in 2021. So Quest used that paper from one of the earlier studies of the Amoris study and following people who ended up getting cardiovascular disease in a very short time, up to 2004. But then the rest of the cohort was followed for another 17 years. So, same sample size, but a longer follow-up. And the longer follow-up tells you something about, so longer follow-ups are generally better than a smaller follow-up, right? Because if more people are getting heart disease and dying within 4 years, then probably they were pretty sick to start with, versus the longer follow-up is, you've got more likely to have people who are generally healthy, and it takes a longer time for, some of that population to die off, right? So anyway, so the same first author, Waldius, 2021, Amora study, Waldius, 2004, Quest. So Quest hadn't updated it based on the newest available information. So from that study, they have a beautiful plot that's in the video of ApoB levels less than 76 milligrams per deciliter, lowest risk for having a major adverse cardiovascular event. So uh, heart attack, I don't remember if it was non-fatal or fatal, stroke, and
Yes.
cardiovascular disease mortality. Um, Now, above that, risk did increase. MACE risk did increase, but it was still in the quote unquote green. So it isn't just less than 76. The higher end of the quote unquote green range, according to them, could be like 92 milligrams per deciliter, but the lowest risk was less than 76. So that's what I'm shooting for.
So now you got me curious why I have my optimal where it is. So let's see, we were just looking at ApoB. Let me come back. Reference table. I want to see why I said it where I did. Um,
Probably Peter Attia is always talking
uh,
about like,
life extension said like less than 80, less than 60 optimal. My cardiologist said less than 70. I don't know why I have it
ah,
set. I do. That's interesting. I have it set between 52 and 60.
So,
Normally I would have my reasoning in here and it's missing. So
I remember you sent me some data where I think you had some small amount of plaque or something along those lines. So in
yeah,
that case, as low as physically possible. I mean, sure, less than 76, but in your case, having some pre-existing plaque, I mean, less than 50, whatever
yeah.
the lowest you can get to.
But this was so specific, 52 to 60. I don't know why I came up with that. I got that from somewhere. I just don't know where now. That's interesting. Oh well. Okay, HDL. I quit scrolling past it. There we go.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, nice. So 58 is most recent data, trend line up. HDL can decline during aging. I mean, it peaks in youth and then it comes down in men and then basically stays flat in the low 50s. So yeah, you've resisted that. That's good
Yeah.
news.
I've set all of these yeah, based on my age. So like from 60 on, what does it do? That's what you see here. So this wouldn't be the same for somebody that's, 50 or 40 or 30.
Gotcha. Yeah, so then the big question here is what two did you do to get your HDL going in the right direction from low, high 40s to, high 50s?
Yeah, right offhand, I can't tell you. I don't know. I'd have to go back and take a look.
Yeah. Triglycerides?
Okay. They're actually nice and low.
Yeah, it should be. Oh, you've got PSA there too.
Oh yeah. But we can come back. Triglycerides, HDL ratio. I got so there's my triglycerides.
Okay, still low.
It could be better.
So less than 45, that's associated with lowest heart disease mortality risk. So that's the ideal. I'm not even there yet. I mean, but looks like yours are around 60, somewhere around 60.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty good. That's pretty good. Um, and the
Trending up.
yeah, I mean, very, very mildly. I mean,
It's a mild slope. Yeah.
yeah. So then that I guess, all right. So then L lipoprotein A, are you measuring lipoprotein A? Trying to
Uh,
figure out why your ApoB would be a bit higher, closer to 80. Triglycerides contribute to ApoB, but then obviously LDL, lipoprotein A.
yeah,
Uh,
I don't do that very often either.
yeah, but interestingly, in your case, there's a wide range. For most people, it's pretty tight. And genetically, I put that in quotes, genetically limited. But you can see yours have ranged from 15 to double that, 33. Um,
Yeah, that's why I typically don't do it because they tell you that it stays pretty flat or pretty consistent. So that's why I haven't tested it. But I can see in my case, it's not very consistent.
yeah. So I can't figure out if I should only focus on ApoB or lipoprotein A because there is some published data suggesting it is more atherogenic than LDL. So does that mean I should be trying to reduce lipoprotein A and ApoB? But if I reduce ApoB and lipoprotein A is a bit higher than it should be, does it matter? I, I, I can't. I still don't have a definitive answer on that.
So I'm assuming mine is based on my meat consumption.
Hmm.
What do you think about that?
So in my case, I don't eat meat that often, even though I have fish and yogurt every day. So uh, it's a higher fat intake in my data. I've been able to cut lipoprotein A in half over the past, 10 years or so from my
Wow.
highest level. But even
By doing what? Just limiting your fat?
higher fat diet.
Higher fat. Okay.
Yeah. But even there's a U shape because if I go too high for fat intake, all the biomarkers start going way too high. Red blood cells go even higher. Hemoglobin goes towards closer to 16. So, I don't want to optimize lipoprotein A and then send the glucose goes up. So I don't want to send everything else in the wrong direction. So it's, how much fat can my body tolerate before I'm messing up the other stuff?
So what kind of stuff are you doing? Avocados and
Not
like,
avocados, but just mostly nuts like almonds, walnuts, peanuts, Brazil nuts, uh, occasionally cashews, occasionally sunflower seeds. But the core is like almonds, peanuts, walnuts.
yeah, see, my diet is really high in nuts and avocado and yeah, so I'm getting a lot of fat.
Yeah. Do
Hmm.
you know what the approximate, like how much of the percentage of calories from fat would be your diet composition?
Ooh, no. There was a time when I was using, I think it was called uh Nutrisense. I think it was one of the CGMs that I was using that I was putting all my food in and looking at it. And that was years ago. And I now I couldn't tell you. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Probably need to do that again.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. All right, wait. So LDL,
Okay, LDL.
trying to figure out where the higher than it should be ApoB. It's not coming from triglycerides, so VLDL, because your triglycerides are relatively low. Yeah, you've got some room to move down in LDL, and so LDL probably the most, the most controversial these days, right? You have people who post.
The
You're gonna
lean
say,
mass hyper responders and all that
but
stuff.
that's a whole different category. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
eating no carbs for, I don't even want to wade into those waters. It's a whole different scenario, right? So, but in the average population, there are conflicting epidemiological studies. Do you want your LDL to be closer to like, some studies suggest even 190, 180 is associated with lowest risk. But so LDL follows an inverse U during aging, low in youth, also low in advanced age. So there too, it's like, how would you know if you're youthful or centenarian levels where they're both very low, right? So,
Yeah.
and then when you consider that there are studies in 80-year-olds that have higher LDL, higher total cholesterol, and they have lower all-cause mortality risk relative to people who have lower LDL. Well, LDL declines towards the end of life. And actually, that's another video I've got in progress where cancer cachexia, lower LDL, and cancer incidence increases during aging. So
Oh,
if someone's got even undiagnosed cancer, I'd bet that their LDL is declining for a long time and they may not even know it.
wow.
So yeah, so anyway, so when considering that, you've got epidemiological studies that haven't adjusted their models for all of the factors that can impact the association for LDL with heart disease or all-cause mortality risk. Like they'll look at the standards, age, sex, BMI, pre-existing CVD, um, but rarely they'll include cancer or liver disease, which can impact LDL. LDL, cholesterol is made by the lipoproteins are made by the liver. So if you have liver disease as an advanced age, you'd be less likely to be even put it out into the blood. So anyway, there's one study that looked at 4.7 million people that adjusted for all of that. Cancer diagnosis, CVD, the standards, age, sex, BMI, dementia, liver disease, kidney disease, like it was like 11 comorbidities. And when they did that, the basically higher is better LDL in association with lowest all-cause mortality risk. No, that's not true anymore. And then the optimal range for CHD mortality risk is 65 to 120. So even though technically, and that might be where your green lines are from, I don't know.
Could be. All right, let's see if I actually have some some reasoning for that recorded here. So we're looking for, I'm sorry, were we just looking at LDL?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. So LDL right there. And then let's come over here. And okay, I've got lots lots of different reasoning. Some of this was probably taken right out of your video.
yeah. Inverse U, I see that.
Yeah. So I got the lowest ACM 130 to 180.
Ah,
Since 120 is significant CVS CHD risk, I was setting my high end to 120.
yeah. But when considering you do,
But there we go. I got your name right here. Yeah, believe
yeah,
that's
but
too
you've
high.
got
Yeah.
that's great, Dave. But you've got the earlier data that didn't adjust for all of the factors that can impact the association for LDL with all-cause mortality, um, where LDL was 130 to 180 lowest risk, unless it says, but not adjusted for all comorbidities.
Yeah.
No worries. So anyway, that's where I think a lot of and I'll probably make a video on this at some point, just, and probably light fires. People are going to be yelling at me in the comments, but the data is what it is. Uh, but knowing that you have was it coronary artery calcium or was it soft plaque? I don't remember in your case.
I had yeah, I could probably pull that up. Though I mean the visuals I think are probably better than anything. So you can see that very little bits of plaque built up here.
Yeah.
And that's the so I've got calcified versus non-calcified shown here.
So I mean, you do have some minor plaque, right? So then the question is, does reducing ApoB to its lowest level, does that help slow the increase, rate of increase over time?
Yeah, and all this was new as of in the past few years because I did a coronary calcium CT about roughly 5 years ago, and I would say I was about maybe zero, I think, is what I was, and now I actually had a score, which scared me because that was a big change, I thought, within the last 5 years.
But still super, super low, right?
It's still low. It's just not as low as I would have liked it to have been. I
Yeah.
mean, zero is what I would have liked it to have been. So,
So then the
but
question is if you can reduce ApoB to, 50, 60 versus 80, you know, will that slow the progression? That's the big, right?
that's the question.
Yeah. Oh, PSA.
So,
PSA is a big
PSA
one too.
on the rise.
Yeah, we got to flip that. We got to reverse that trend quick.
Yeah.
And that's another reason I'd suggest, the TNF-alpha and IL-6, because, if PSA is increasing because there is some small cancerous thing growing, if the pro-inflammatory cytokines are increasing over time too, that's another signal that something is going on that we want to get on top of, faster, sooner than later.
Absolutely. PSA free, same.
We can even look at the doubling time for your total PSA, not the free, but if you go up to the
Oh,
total,
back to total again.
yeah. So you had values, let's see, the trend line is like zero point 0.8, and then it's, yeah, about double. So that's about double over the past 5 years. I don't know how, I'd have to look that up. Not an expert on PSA, even though I'm familiar and have looked at optimal ranges, but I mean, values as low as zero point 0.3 are found in youth, so that would be my target. But the 5 year doubling time, I mean, yours essentially have doubled on average 5 years based on the trend line. So I'd have to look that up and see like risk based on like
Yeah,
how long should it take to double? Should it be 30 years, 50 years? I don't know I just don't know what that is.
that would be interesting to know. Keep me posted.
Yeah,
So you got PSA free, percent PSA declining.
yeah.
So yeah, going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that is in the wrong direction. I looked that up the other day. It is going in the wrong direction. But it's still relatively high. I think if I remember correctly, like PSA free, percent free being like less than 15% or less than 10% was associated with an increased risk of prostate cancer. So, I mean, yours,
Yeah, this right here is the high mark of my optimal, so I'm quite a bit higher than optimal.
yeah. I'd have to look that up though. I don't want to confuse it. That one is not as memorized. It's still fresh because it's so new.
All right. Testosterone gradually declines with aging. Mine's been increasing.
Resisted it, yeah. So that's another interesting one because you haven't gotten leaner over the past 4 years, right?
No.
So testosterone is associated with BMI. Leaner BMI is higher testosterone, and then as BMI increases, testosterone levels drop. So that you haven't gotten leaner, it suggests there's stuff you've added in or are doing that has potentially helped you resist, right? Age-related decline.
I mean, I've heard it claimed that you can't take supplements and increase your testosterone.
Mm.
I think that's wrong. I've actually seen it. I've also seen it in when I run. It seems like when I run, my testosterone increases along with the miles that I put in. So, I mean, so my message to a lot of guys out there, instead of just jumping straight to TRT, try, get up and take a run sometimes, just go get physical. Don't sit so long because that'll drive your T low.
Yeah. Or it could be that you've got, conqueror genetics, where the more active you are, it's good for your testosterone. So
I would be curious to see that. I don't know if they've identified those genes yet, have they?
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. All right, wait, so free testosterone?
Okay, yeah. So now that's terrible. My free testosterone has been quite low because my sex hormone binding globulin is pretty high.
Yeah, so that's a tricky one. I'm in the same boat. Um, I don't know. Same boat with SHBG being high. And there are published studies on free tea and all-cause mortality risk, but on the other hand, like Luigi Fontana, who studies like calorie restriction, free tea levels drop. And part of his rationale for lower androgen levels in people on CR is that that may be part of the anti-cancer or reduced cancer risk in calorie-restricted animals. So maybe that translates into people. I don't know if that's true. And then SHBG is a tricky one because CR increases it dramatically. Exercise increases it, but not as much as CR. So that's, you're super exercisers. So that's probably a component of why yours, maybe higher than most. But on the other side of that, SHBG increases during aging. So there's also something besides exercising and calorie restriction super high. And then it just increases over time for the average population who's not in that boat, which also that is associated with increased Alzheimer's incidence and metabolic syndrome. So how can those two things, how do you square that circle where,
I don't know.
yeah,
I've actually had people tell me that the fact that I'm low in free testosterone is not necessarily a bad thing.
yeah,
Their way of looking at it was that just means that maybe your cells are uptaking more of it, so it's just not free floating in your serum. Which, I mean, if that's the case, that would be a good thing. I just don't know how you would measure such a thing.
yeah. Oh,
So
wait, so SHBG, let's take a look at that.
I can keep scrolling down. I know it's in here. Oh, pregnenolone. There's my DHT. So that's going in the well, it's going in the wrong direction for aging, but at least it's to me, it's going in the right direction because it's heading toward my optimal.
Yeah,
And I like to keep it low to keep the hair thick. So I'm doing things to try to drive DHT down too. So
nice.
uh, my estradiol, which has been quite high at times. Same with total estrogens. Um, Only because I'm supplementing with pregnenolone and DHEA, which are upstream precursors of both testosterone and estrogen. So to get that high testosterone, I'm going to get high estrogen right along with it. There's no getting one without the other. But then I'm taking things like calcium D-glucarate and DIM to try to bind with the estrogens to move them out. Although, estrogens aren't necessarily a bad thing either. Like what, 17 estradiol is a good thing for men, but you can't really be picky with DIM and calcium D-glucarate. They just bind to all of it, not the ones you want.
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah.
so here we go. Here's
Yeah.
sex hormone
Not,
binding.
not terribly high. I mean,
No, higher
it's
than I want because here's my green optimal down here, and now I'm outside of the reference range.
yeah, but uh, I mean, like I said, when considering that vigorous exercise, like active people, relatively high VO2 maxes have values approximately double the reference range, and then people on CR fourfold higher than, well, not the reference range, but like 120 versus, exercisers, I think if I remember correctly in the paper, is like 60 to 70 for people who are fit and active. So, um, yeah, I'm not too worried about SHBG. The thing is, there's a biological age clock that includes it so that, and that clock is as good as PhenoAge, but just it includes some different markers like SHBG. So that'd be one where I would look older. But
Hmm.
is it though really, right? Because if it's coming from CR and exercise.
I'm not familiar with that clock. I would love to play with that. How do I
Yeah.
get a hold of that one?
It's longevity tools. If you type in longevitytools.com or in Google
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that.
or
I
longevity.
I can almost guarantee you I'm going to be watching over, both parts of this video myself and taking notes since I haven't been doing that while we've been talking. So,
Nice. So are there biomarkers we didn't cover that you want to cover?
uh, yeah, I mean, I cover anything you want to see. I don't know what else we've got. Mitochondrial health. Have we done anything there?
Not yet, but wait, what we could do for another one? I don't know how many of these you want to do, but HRV, resting heart rate, we can go through that in another video. We could go
Oh,
through
okay.
IOLA data in another video. I mean, epigenetic.
Sure. Yeah, we could definitely go over all my true diagnostic data. That's all over the place.
Hmm,
Especially since I told you I tested what 4 or 5 times all last year, every time after a bad life influence, just because I wanted to see what it would do. And so I've got some, pretty nasty looking data there. So that could be fun.
Yeah. I'm not worried about the epigenetics so much. For me, I want the biomarkers that they're based on. So, Dunedin pace, yeah, I may have mentioned it, right? Where it's got, I think, 18 biomarkers. VO2 max is one of them, waist to hip ratio, HbA1c, CRP, HSCRP. Gum health is a big one there too, which is included.
Have you
Um,
looked at any of your raw data for True Diagnostic?
yeah, I don't want to give too much of it away before the ice cream, if ice cream cake comes, but yeah, somebody reached out to me and is looking at I can't do any of it. I don't have that expertise. So he's looked at the raw data. What I'm actually want to do is, so remember I was saying about GrimAge being associated or the strongest predictor of all-cause mortality risk based on epigenetics.
Yeah.
So I asked him if it's possible to identify the CPGs, the methylation sites, if 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 he could identify which of those sites in GrimAge, in my case, were the worst, and then can we identify which proteins that those were derived from, right? So is it cystatin C and I have hyper or hypomethylation, and that suggests my cystatin C level should be optimized and I'd have a lower GrimAge. So I don't know if that will yield any fruit. Maybe it will, but that's how I see the epigenetics. Can I use their data to identify real biomarkers and then go for the biomarkers instead?
Interesting. Yeah, I was driving Ryan crazy because he was being very generous and he was taking some time to walk me through my raw data. And I don't think he was prepared for the amount of questions that I had. I think he might have thought I was just like a regular consumer and I was just my eyes were going to glaze over. Well, they did. My eyes still did glaze over because a lot of it was way over my head. But I really did try to hang in there, and then I had all kinds of questions for him. Some things I couldn't make sense of by the way the report was because they might have had the same thing listed maybe 8 different times with 8 different values. And I think I may have the terminology incorrect, but I guess there's different isomers of those particular items. And yeah, they didn't label them with like, -1, -2, -3. So I didn't know which isomer was what. So I couldn't make any sense of that. And yeah, so it was very confusing.
So that was the raw data. You were digging
That
into
was
the raw.
the raw data.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. So what were you
Yeah.
trying to get out of the raw data?
I was just trying to make sense of it. I wanted to try to see like, what is it they're looking at specifically? And I went to the human metabolome database and I was cross-referencing all those. I did the same thing with IOLO data. I wanted to see exactly what proteins they were looking at, what metabolites. And then if I had a clue which things were, the biggest drivers, then maybe I would have a clue what I could change in my diet or my lifestyle to move those. Because I mean, right now they don't offer a whole lot of um, support in how to change your methylation status, right? They just give you the data and basically don't smoke, exercise, get lots of sleep. But there's got to be more to it than that.
And you're already doing all of those things, eat real food, exercise, like you
Yeah.
said, there are levels that if you're able to write the code where you could take their raw data and identify, like even if it's Dunedin pace, identify the methylation sites that are contributing to a higher, a faster rate of aging, that'd be something that I think you'd be able to market to them or your own tool where people enter they take their data, they bring it to you, and they use to see where the weak spots are. Then maybe we send them over to my app, and then they put in their diet data and everything else, and we give them what potentially could improve those things, right? So,
Yeah, it's kind of what I was hoping to get out of it, but I know at some point we're crossing into proprietary, information, so they're not really going to be willing to share everything under the kimono. But
but if it's your raw data, I mean, you
yeah,
know,
oh yeah, my raw data, sure.
yeah. Do you see in their raw data, like, is it labeled? I don't know. I haven't looked at it, but like, it'd be
I,
great if they had it separated for like, Dunedin pace, like cardiorespiratory fitness. These are all the CPGs that are related to that. Like if they had all the biomarkers that the CPGs are based on, and then you could go for it like that. But I'm guessing it's not organized like that at all.
no, in fact, I can pull that up if you want to look at it. It's really not a for consumer
Yeah.
report. It's just it's something probably they're beta testing as far as just throwing it into a report format. Um, they originally accidentally sent me the assay data, and I pulled up Genome Studio because I wanted to be able to pull in I think in their case it's Lumina. I can't remember which lab now. I wanted to be able to just pull in that raw data that they gave me and be able to view it, but I could not get it to load in Genome Studio to save my life.
Oh,
And when I mentioned this to Ryan, he sort of laughed and he's like, "Yeah, that would be very difficult to do." And he just because I guess I'm such a noob, he found that humorous that I was even trying. So must be something really silly that I was not understanding that made him chuckle. But
hmm.
hopefully we'll have another call at some point and he'll be able to explain it to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean I can pull it up and show it to you. Maybe you'll
Okay.
understand why I was so confused.
Yeah.
So let me get there. I mean, unless you want to do that on another call, but
Yeah. 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 Well, I've got 2.5 hours of content. I'm gonna have to cut it to clips, and it's gonna take me a while.
sorry about that. Yeah,
No,
I
no,
could
it's
tell you
great.
go on and do go on forever with this stuff, so
Same. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's great. Thanks, Dave.
no problem.
Yeah. All right. So I guess we'll wrap it up, right? So thanks again, Dave. I appreciate you sharing all of your data, or almost all of your data.
Almost all. We're getting there. We're getting
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. So we've got what epigenetics we can go through. I guess Iolo, you have one test, or how many tests?
Oh no, I maybe have like four,
Oh,
maybe
wow.
maybe five.
So are you plotting it like um the
No,
600%?
I actually haven't plotted it yet. It's usually kind of like I was doing it the same way I was doing it with my blood marker data prior to plotting it. I would just look at what changed from time to time and how that affected my score overall, trying to make sense.
Yeah.
So, but
So
now
I'm
I
only,
think we'll plot it.
but not all of it. I don't know that all of it. I mean, so the
Yeah,
way I
not
see
all of it would be meaningful.
it, I think it can be, but separating it into groups, like for example, there are like 300 triglycerides. I mean, but they don't
Oh,
all go in the same
yeah.
direction. Some you want a little bit higher and some you want lower. Same thing for the diglycerides. Well, granted, there are more anyway. So uh, the age-related trends are interesting, but you'd have to know it's so tricky for a lot of those metabolites to know directionality. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. All right.
And
So
it's
we got a
probably
whole
not
bunch.
going to mean anything to me, but it would to you. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the biggest one off the top of my head, kynurenine divided by tryptophan.
oh
So
yeah, we did talk about that one
yeah,
previously. Yeah.
I track that in a separate tab. So, that'd be one of the first ones I'd want to see where your data is and avoiding that from increasing during aging.
I think that was the one I was able to recognize because I think they called it out in one of my first reports. And so that I've been watching that ever since.
Nice, 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 nice. All right, Dave,
I
we can
did
go off.
sign up. I signed up to this subscription plan, so I'm getting it like probably every quarter now.
Cool, 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 cool. We can go on forever. So, all right, my
Yeah.
friend, talk to you soon.
Thank you, my friend. This was
Okay.
fun.
No, thank you. Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye.